Game 840 here. So last night, Internet Blood Sports returned. I went up against Joseph Cotto on the kill stream hosted by Ethan Ralph. And just this afternoon, I subscribed to the kill stream, just $8 a month. It's an absolute bargain. What a panoply of educational material. It's a great adjunct to 40 University. So let's tune in
Google
here.
Meet recently, and it's a lot better now. As you can see, it has the 4-panel here. It actually looks not bad like that. But, okay, let me go ahead and just zoom in on Mr. Ford. Now, Mr. Ford, you've not been on the show before, and how we usually do these, I mean, it's kind of mostly hands-off. You know, I'll adjudicate as necessary and cut in maybe with a question, and we'll take some questions from the audience probably later on, etc. But, you know, mostly going to be between you guys. But how I like to always start it off on these is to let people introduce themselves and introduce the ideas and topics they think they're going to be making throughout the debate. And since you've not been on the show before, I figured I would let you start off.
Oh, okay, great. So if we were going to see voter fraud in the election on a massive scale, we would see certain weird results, such as in the swing states. We would see that they disproportionately go to Biden, or we'd see a massive voter increase in the most important swing states. We would see in the most important Democratic precincts, we would see anomalous results. And we simply haven't seen that. What decided the 2020 election was simply that Biden did 2% better than Hillary Clinton in the suburbs. Okay, so what would we see if we were going to see voter fraud? We'd see things like disproportionate Democratic turnout in key states. And I'm reading here from Henry Olsen, writing in the Washington Post soon after the election, about a week after the election. He wrote this. So if fraud were behind President-elect Joe Biden's win, we would expect significantly higher turnout increases in key states when compared to the nation as a whole. We would expect to see higher turnout increases within those states in Democratic areas rather than in Republican areas, since those regions are places where Democrats are likely to hide any stolen votes. We would expect to see significantly larger shifts in voter margins toward the Democrats from other previous elections as the fraud alters the area's normal voting patterns. None of these early warning signs of fraud appeared in the results. So we did not have anomalous results in the 2020 election. We had a huge turnout election. Right, we saw that in red states, we saw that in blue states, we saw that in purple states. So some of the rise in turnout could be because we've had population growth, but we also had proportionally higher turnout because there was a lot of voter enthusiasm. So voter enthusiasm rather than fraud is the most obvious explanation for the large increases in votes cast in swing states. And the results within swing states do not support allegations of voter fraud. So take Wisconsin, for example. So Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Trump narrowly won those in 2016. He narrowly lost them in 2020. Right, that's not anomalous. Biden only flipped 2 counties in Wisconsin that Trump had narrowly carried in 2016. Trump's margins in rural and small metro area counties only narrowly changed from 2016, sometimes a couple of points up and sometimes a couple of points down. Biden's margins in the state Democratic strongholds were not unusually high. Turnout was not noticeably higher than in Trump regions. Trump's vote share increased in Milwaukee, and turnout in that deep blue county increased by less than 4% compared with a 10% statewide increase. So none of this is what we would expect to see if voter fraud drove the results. And the same factors existed in Michigan and Pennsylvania. Biden flipped only 3 Michigan counties, each of which Trump had carried by only 3 points or less in 2016. Biden flipped only 2 Pennsylvania counties, Erie and Northampton, both of which are known as bellwethers that usually back the winner. Philadelphia is widely alleged to be the site of massive voter fraud. So when Joseph Cotto's pressed later in the program for which site did he think the results were most anomalous, he named Pennsylvania. But Philadelphia reported fewer votes cast than in 2016, at least at the time that Henry Olsen wrote this. And Biden got a smaller vote lead in Philadelphia than Hillary Clinton received. So this is a pretty incompetent performance if the fix is in. Though all 3 state results indicate what was to blame for Trump's defeat in 2020, suburban vote slippage. So really, the election was decided by Joe Biden winning 2 percentage points more from the suburban vote than Hillary Clinton won in 2016. So Trump's margin in the 3 suburban counties surrounding Milwaukee up from 104,500 votes in 2016 to just 96,750 in 2020, even as voter turnout increased from 369,000 to 418,000. So he would have won Wisconsin had he won these counties and similar suburbs of Madison and Minneapolis by the same percentage margins he did in 2016. The same is true in suburban Detroit. Trump lost that area by 69,000 votes in 2020, lost it only by 5,500 votes in 2016. And in suburban Philadelphia, he lost by 188,000 votes in 2016, 283,000 votes in 2020. So Trump would have been ahead in Pennsylvania by 50,000 votes if he'd simply lost suburban Philly by the same margins as 2016. And these are not isolated events. Trump's suburban vote margins dropped in deep red non-swing states such as Louisiana, Kentucky, Missouri. So pretty much nationwide, there's a 2% swing in the suburbs to the Democratic candidate Joe Biden. So Trump also did significantly worse in suburbs in deep blue states such as Oregon and Washington. So Trump's plaintive cry toward the end of his campaign for suburban women to please like me is more indicative of why he lost than anything that Trump now says about voter fraud. And that was a result that happened all over the country. It happened in red states. It happened in purple states. It happened in blue states. So that's what I'm coming from. There's just no evidence that voter fraud determined the election. So if we were going to see massive amounts of fraud, we would expect to see significantly higher turnout increases in key states when compared to the nation as a whole. We'd expect to see higher turnout increase within those states in Democratic areas rather than Republican areas. And we would expect to see significantly larger shifts in vote margins toward the Democrats from other previous elections as the fraud alters the area's normal voting patterns. And none of these warning signs of fraud appear in the results. Boss.
All right. Now, Go ahead, Mr. Cotto, if you want to respond, and Luke, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit more later on, that's cool. And also, I'm still trying to figure out how to get it to stop on one tile here, so that'll be a work in progress while I figure that out. They changed the system here on Google Meet literally today, so I'm working that out, and we'll figure it out. Go ahead, Mr. Cotto.
Well, I'm Joseph Cotto. Obviously, I'm the co-host of Cotto Gottfried. If you've not heard of the show, that's no problem. Just type it in on Google, Cotto Gottfried, and Rumble. That's where the video uploads go. We do live streams on YouTube, but that's sort of hit or miss. So it would be a good idea if you subscribe to the show on Rumble, subscribe to it on YouTube. And it's also on Apple Podcasts and a slew of podcasting outlets. There are typically 3 episodes uploaded each week. Now, talking about what's going on with voter fraud, it's a very broad field of study, if you will. That's perhaps not the best way of putting it, but it is something that needs to be studied. It's not really just something that people should throw out there as a political punchline. It's a very real thing. And you can look at 2020, which I'm going to do in a minute, but you should also consider voter fraud moreover, sort of what led up to 2020 and what's likely to continue in states where they don't have good balloting safeguards. So, I really would like to get into the broader matter here, but I will just talk about 2020.
Okay, so Joseph just mentioned states without good balloting safeguards. Well, you need to provide evidence of states where there are bad balloting safeguards, and I am unaware of such evidence. There may be evidence out there. Look, I know, I'm no voter fraud expert. I know what a voter fraud expert sounds like, and I am not one. All right? I just read articles, read books, listen to podcasts, try to get educated, and then this is just a game of chess. I come to the show with my favorite sources of information and my values, and I compare and contrast and compete with you as you provide your favorite sources of information and your moral values. So this is internet chess of the very highest level. I mean, this is 40 University. This is a class in rhetoric here.
Specifically some things which happened, which...
So, by the way, there are 5 states that have been mail ballot only for a few elections, and there's simply no evidence of which I'm aware. I've studied the literature. This is brought out repeatedly. There's simply no evidence that these 5 states that are exclusively balloting by mail, that they have any more examples of voter fraud than other states. Now, would you say 40? Like, that doesn't make any common sense. All right, signature verification, experts take hours sometimes to determine whether or not a signature is legitimate. And here you've got untrained people who are processing mail-in ballots, and they're making decisions in 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Really, 40, you're telling me that people without any training in signature verification or minimal training, remember, the United States election system is primarily staffed by volunteers, and often different counties have different standards, states have different rules, right? It's a confusing, buzzing mess. 40, just on a common sense basis, given that experts will take hours to determine signature verification, how do lightly trained people make such decisions within 5 or 10 seconds? That doesn't quite seem right. And so I'm no expert in this, but yeah, that is a good challenge. How can lightly trained people make legitimate decisions about, say, mail-in ballot signatures when experts may take hours? On the other hand, I just don't know of any evidence that shows that the United States has had systemic voter fraud with mail-in ballots. There is no evidence of which I am aware.
Are basically inexplicable. And I think that if you look at them reasonably, one would infer that the only explanation is...
So I don't know any election results that are inexplicable. Like, give me a state where the results are inexplicable. Trump narrowly won Pennsylvania in 2016. He narrowly lost it in 2020. It wasn't like there are hugely anomalous results in different Pennsylvania counties. He narrowly won Michigan in 2016. He narrowly lost Michigan in 2020. He narrowly won Wisconsin in 2016. He narrowly lost it in 2020. Not many counties flipped. Where are the anomalous results? Like, what are the counties with, wildly anonymous results? It was a high turnout election, not just for Democrats, also for Republicans.
Unsavory activity on the part of certain people who've been entrusted with either.
Okay, unsavory activity on the part of who? Like, where's the evidence for unsavory activity? Like, making an allegation of unsavory activity, that's easy, but providing the evidence for it is much more challenging. So where's the evidence that there was unsavory activity? Unsavory activity is like a really vague term. God forbid you could make an accusation that 40 has engaged in some unsavory activity. Like, but what's unsavory activity to you may be godly activity to me. Like, 40 was just trying to make a shidduch, just trying to get married to some, godly woman. And he was just like, with God on his mind, he was reaching out to make an advance to a woman. So what looks godly to me and to other people, you might say, oh, this is unsavory. Now, was he going for her boobs there? No, I was not going for her boobs. It was that, like, she slipped and I slipped, and like my hand might have like brushed her chest, but I was just, God forbid, I was trying to stop her from falling to the ground. And so she might have gotten seriously hurt. So I like reached out to help her, to steady her, to stop her from falling to the ground. And then like might have been a little bit of a slip. And you'd go, oh, 40, that's totally unsavory. I see, you're going in there for a titty grab. And that's not what happened whatsoever. I mean, that's crazy. So unsavory, you could apply the term unsavory to my whole life, right? You could choose unsavory activity that I engaged in second grade. I used to take sticks and I'd lift up the girls' skirts, and you say 40, that was unsavory, but I was looking for love in all the wrong places. I was doing the best I can. I was doing the best I could with the tools and the skills that I had available to me at the time. I wasn't trying to instigate Me Too moments in Avondale Primary School in the 1970s. I was just doing the best I could to meet my needs. Now, you may call it unsavory, and the teachers sure thwacked me a lot with the ruler. And, I mean, there's all sorts of activity that you can call unsavory, but we have to get specific. You can call anything unsavory. I mean, God forbid, I could say, Laponius Maximus Meridius, I'm sure he's going to make some unsavory comments, God forbid, in the chat today. So unsavory quite a nebulous term. It's just not scientific, bro. I mean, in the peer-reviewed universe that I live in, we don't use unsavory.
Voting or administering elections. And what I will read from here are 7 key points brought up by Patrick Basham. He's the head of the Democracy.
Okay, so this is important. I'm not an expert in voter fraud. Joseph Cotto is not an expert in voter fraud. Even Ethan Ralph, host of the Kill Stream, is not an expert in voter fraud. So what we're essentially doing on this stream is he's coming with his experts, I'm coming with my experts, and we're comparing. So let's go to Patrick Basham. So again, Google this guy. He seems, God forbid, perhaps a tad unsavory. Perhaps. I mean, I'm sure he's done a lot of great work, but certainly there are people who have made an effort to describe him as unsavory. So for me, it's a non-scientific term. It's not really peer-reviewed. At 40 University, we don't tend to use terms like unsavory. We just call it differently abled. All right, so Patrick Basham, he starts out, to say out loud that you find the results of the 2020 presidential election odd is to invite derision. You must be a crank or a conspiracy theorist. Mark me down as a crank then. I am a pollster, and I find this election to be deeply puzzling. I also think the Trump campaign is still well within its rights to contest the tabulations. No one's saying that Trump campaign didn't have the right to contest the tabulations. Something very strange happened in America's democracy in the early hours of Wednesday, November 4, and the days that followed. It's reasonable for a lot of Americans to want to find out exactly what. Right, so it actually is pretty straightforward, and I'm reading an analysis here by political scientist Stephen Taylor. So it was a large turnout election. It was conducted more by mail-in ballots than usual, so it took a few more days to count in some localities. So a pollster like Patrick Basham says, I am a pollster, okay? I am a moral leader, guys. And when you selected me as your moral leader, this is not a responsibility that I took lightly. Like, I lose sleep sometimes worrying about moral turpitude, generally unsavory behavior being conducted behind closed doors by my flock. And sometimes, God forbid, I feel like saying, flock off! I cannot abide this wickedness any longer. So you'd think a pollster would know it's not unusual for some states to take days to finish the count. But since it usually does not matter to the Electoral College vote totals, we don't usually pay that much attention. So the following claim alone really suggests one of the following. Either Patrick Basham is being disingenuous, isn't a very good analyst, or is a victim of motivated reasoning. I would side with all three. So Patrick Basham, should I call him Basham? Like Cotto calls him Basham. Cotto's an educated man. Let's call him Basham. So first, consider some facts. Patrick Basham writes, President Trump received more votes than any previous incumbent seeking re-election. Why does that matter? He got 11 million more votes than in 2016, the third largest rise in support ever for an incumbent. By way of comparison, President Obama was comfortably re-elected in 2012 with 3.5 million fewer votes than he received in 2008. Like, why does anyone think that means anything? All right, so population growth plus increased turnout means Trump was certain to get more votes this election. So what? It's like saying, yeah, the New York Jets, they went 1-15, but on several games they ran the ball for more yards than their opponent. And normally when a team runs the ball for more yards than their opponent, they win. So the Jets must have been screwed over by the refs. Okay, since Trump lost the popular vote in 2016, trying to fit Trump into a pattern of past winners of the presidency makes no analytical sense. Trump is an outlier regardless of anything else going on. Basham says, we are told that Biden won more votes nationally than any presidential candidate in history, but he won a record low of 17% of counties. Right? This is like saying, oh, well, the New York Jets, they dominated on second down compared to their opponent in the third quarter. Biden won a record low of 17% of counties. He only won 524 counties as opposed to the 873 counties Obama won in 2008. Yet Biden somehow outdid Obama in votes. Now, this sounds smart, but it leaves out a key bit of information. What are the populations of the counties under discussion? County lines are largely arbitrary as it pertains to population. Obama won the national popular vote in 2008 by 7.2 percentage points. It stands to reason he would have won more counties. You'd think a pollster would have understood this dynamic. It is therefore either a poor analytical choice to compare 2020 to 2008, instead of 2016 to 2020, or it's an attempt to create doubt by distracting. So 2016 to 2020 comparison of counties provides this. So based on an NPR analysis of more than 3,000 counties, it was a mostly base election with some key persuasion in Democratic-leaning suburbs that went for Joe Biden by wider margins than they did for Hillary Clinton in 2016. So in 2020, there have been far fewer counties that flipped from one major party to the other as compared with 4 years earlier. So Biden voting counties equal 70% of America's economy. So then Basham makes more weird assertions. So that just making your claims for voter fraud on the basis of this Patrick Basham essay just seems really shoddy. I mean, maybe there's someone out there, I haven't seen it yet, who's made a good solid case for this voter fraud argument, but making it on the basis of Patrick Basham's column just seems incredibly shoddy to me. Another anomaly, writes Basham, is found in the comparison between the polls and the non-polling metrics. Non-polling metrics include party registration trends, the candidates' respective primary votes, candidate enthusiasm, social media followings, broadcast and digital media ratings, online searches, the number of especially small donors, and the number of individuals betting on each candidate. Despite poor recent performances, media and academic polls have an impressive 80% record predicting the winner during the modern era. But when the polls err, non-polling metrics do not. The latter have a 100% record. Guys, did you know that non-polling metrics have a 100% record? So why aren't we paying attention to them? Why do we keep talking about the polls when, according to Patrick Basham, non-polling metrics, they have a 100% record. Every non-polling metric forecasts Trump's re-election. Okay, so if non-polling metrics have a 100% success rate, why don't we use them instead of polls? I mean, if this claim is correct, there's a massive money-making opportunity here for someone, given public concerns about polling. If you're going to assert that such non-polling metrics are awesome, it would be nice to see some of these metrics and get an explanation of why they are so great. And it's amazing that a pollster like Patrick Basham would think that non-random metrics like social media following would mean anything. You can buy social media followers. This is a shock that the President of the United States would have a lot of Twitter followers. Does not take mad analytical skills to suss out the follow does not mean a supporter in that context. Same logic would apply to TV ratings. And the primary vote thing is just a ridiculous metric. And then Basham concludes with this list. Late on election night, with Trump comfortably ahead, many swing states stopped counting ballots. In most cases, observers were removed from the counting facilities. Counting generally continued without the observers. There's no evidence that observers were forced out of counting facilities. Right? This observer thing is a sleight of hand to create doubt. There's no evidence. Where's the evidence, Patrick? Also, observers are not required in any event. All right, let's play a little bit more here from last night's debate.
Institute, a very good pollster. He's someone who I recommend people take seriously when it comes to analyzing where any given election season is headed. His firm was one of the only ones, 2016, to accurately predict that Donald Trump would win the Electoral College, and it also accurately.
Okay, so he was right about 2016, and he was wrong about 2020. He predicted a Trump victory in 2020, so he's 1 for 2. All right, he's got a 50% batting average. Last Man says Gavin Newsom struck 20% of the California recall signatures. If the same happened in contested states, Donald Trump would have reached 270 electoral votes, but it didn't. We had with mail-in ballots, fewer than 1% got struck, and so why was that? All right, so each state has different requirements for what constitutes a valid mail-in ballot. And this time around, there was a lot of legislation to ensure that people who made mistakes with their mail-in ballot, frequently they would have an opportunity to cure the ballot. So this was conducted, to the best of my knowledge, legally. They legally changed the system so that fewer ballots would be rejected. Now, I don't know that Gavin Newsom struck 20% of the California recall signatures. I mean, was he going through the recall signatures? I don't know what standards. They didn't enforce the signature match standards. Okay, where's the evidence? All right, you're coming up with things, but throw down links to provide evidence.
Well, it also predicted that Donald Trump would win the Electoral College in 2020. It was only off in states that were, in my opinion, quite rife with fraud. So the 7 points which Basham brought up in The Spectator, by the way.
Okay, he said that certain states are rife with fraud. Like, which states? The number one state that he named when pressed is Pennsylvania. Where's the anomaly? Trump narrowly won in 2016. He narrowly lost in 2020. Very few counties changed. Like, give me some anomalies in specific counties. How are they anomalous? Right? We need specifics here.
They are as follows. Number one, late on election night with Trump comfortably ahead, many swing states stopped counting ballots. In most cases, observers were removed from the counting facilities. Counting generally continued without the observers. Number two, statistically abnormal vote counts were the new normal when counting resumed. They were unusually large in size, hundreds of thousands, and had an unusually high 90% and above Biden.
Okay, where's the evidence for this? Right, Patrick Basham doesn't provide any evidence. Joseph Cotto is simply reading aloud from Patrick Basham, doesn't provide any evidence. You have some counties, some areas, some cities, some states that are going to go disproportionately for Biden, other areas going to go disproportionately for Trump. There's nothing anomalous about that. Some counties, Trump's going to win 80% of the vote. Other counties, Biden's going to win 80% plus of the vote.
To Trump ratio. Number three, late arriving ballots were counted in Pennsylvania. 23,000 absentee ballots have impossible postal return dates, and another 86,000 of such extraordinary return dates that they raise serious questions. Number four, the failure to match signatures on mail-in ballots, the destruction of mail-in.
Okay, so some precincts are heavily in favor of one party. Trump won some precincts 90-10. Biden won others 90-10. Clinton won Philadelphia County 83-15 in 2016. There are precincts within the county that are 90% plus Democrat. Trump wins Fulton County 84-14. You'd think a pollster would know better. Getting a 90-10 Biden outcome in a precinct known to be roughly 90% Democratic is not statistically abnormal. It's quite the opposite. What would be statistically abnormal would be if a precinct known to have a 90-10 Democrat-Republican split was coming out 50-50. Now, late arriving ballots. Just because a ballot is late does not ipso facto make it a problem. Second, this claim is misleading because the state allowed a 3-day grace period for ballots to arrive. This was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, you may think the U.S. Supreme Court is wrong, but that's the system. And then Basham says the failure to match signatures on mail-in ballots, the destruction of mail-in ballot envelopes, which must contain signatures. This falls into the got evidence category. Okay, I believe it's standard procedure to trash envelopes after processing. So once the ballot is separated from the envelope is worthless for determining any specific ballot's validity, since due to privacy, the ballot is not connected back to the envelope in any way. And then historically low absentee ballot rejection rates. Well, they changed the rules. What makes a valid mail-in ballot this time around? Such as Biden's narrow margin, that is political analyst Robert Barnes observes, if the states simply impose the same absentee ballot rejection rates as recent cycles, then Trump wins the election. Okay, that's an assertion. Where's the evidence? And then Patrick Basham says, missing votes in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, 50,000 votes held on 47 USB cards are missing. Right, this is a rampant assertion on Twitter based solely on one man's statements and statements not made under oath. Now, it boils down to some dude said. And who calls USB thumb drives USB cards?
Mail-in ballot envelopes, which must contain signatures. Number five, historically low absentee ballot rejection rates despite the massive expansion of mail voting, such as Biden's narrow margin that, as political analyst Robert Barnes observes, quote, if the states simply impose the same absentee ballot rejection rate as recent cycles, then Trump wins the election, end quote. Number six, missing votes in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, which for those who don't know is outside of Philadelphia, 50,000 votes held on 47 USB cards are missing. Number seven, non-resident voters. Matt Branyard's Voter Integrity Project estimates that 20,312 people who no longer met residency requirements cast ballots in Georgia. Biden's margin in Georgia is 12,670 votes.
All right, now wait.
Okay, so Matt Brainard's Voter Integrity Project. All right, this is the former data chief strategist for Trump for president. All right, this is not some disinterested observer. Like, he estimates the 20,000 people who no longer met residency requirements cast ballot in Georgia. He estimates where's the evidence? All right, we need to see a little evidence. And then Basham says, serious chain of custody breakdowns, invalid residential addresses, record numbers of dead people voting, ballots in pristine condition without creases. Okay, we're back to the got evidence category. Assertions are not evidence, and all Patrick Basham brings are assertions. Then we got statistical anomalies, writes Basham. In Georgia, Biden overtook Trump with 89% of the votes counted. For the next 53 batches of votes counted, Biden led Trump by the same 50.05 to 49.95% margin in every single batch. It is particularly perplexing that all statistical anomalies and tabulation abnormalities were in Biden's favor. Now, 53 counts in a row with the exact same percentages sounds fishy, but where's the evidence for this? Like, he provides no evidence. All we get is Basham's assertion, right? He does not seem to take the notion of evidence very seriously. Assertions are not evidence. And that we can conceive of a scenario does not make it so, right? I can conceive of a massive international plot by a shadowy communist organization to subvert U.S. elections by hacking our system. I can conceive of, alien crash landings in Kansas who have fantastic powers. We can conceive of many things, but that's not enough for these conceptions to be reality, right? We need facts, data, evidence.
Hey, now wait, we can't just read the whole thing. You read enough here. Now, what do you say to this, Mr. Ford?
I mean, this is just clown show level analysis. We heard for months before the November election that there was going to be a red mirage because Trump encouraged his voters not to use mail-in ballots. So therefore, because Republican legislatures, generally speaking, in the key swing states, passed laws that mail-in ballots could not be counted until after the polls closed. Therefore, for weeks before the election, we knew that there was going to be early returns were going to favor Donald Trump. So there's nothing anomalous that after about 11 p.m. on the East Coast, suddenly you start seeing a strong switch towards Biden, because we always knew that mail-in ballots were going to heavily favor Joe Biden as opposed to Donald Trump, while in-person voting was going to heavily favor Donald Trump. So this was widely discussed for months before the election that there would be a red mirage, and it's exactly what happened. Now, another thing you'll notice about this Patrick Basham piece is he doesn't provide any evidence. He just throws out all these assertions like statistically abnormal vote counts with the new normal. Well, where's the evidence for this? He just throws things out. Also, some precincts are heavily in favor of one party. Like Trump's going to win some precincts 90-10. Biden's going to win some precincts 90-10. That's the way. I mean, there are entire cities, counties that are overwhelmingly populated by voters that support one party. That's not at all unusual. Now, as far as late arriving ballots, well, just because a ballot arrives late does not mean it's in and of itself illegal, because the U.S. Supreme Court allows longer deadlines for absentee ballots in Pennsylvania and North Carolina. So this is part of the legal process. And Joseph is saying, well, voter fraud is such a broad topic. It can be very broad, but you can also narrow it down so it's manageable, and you simply define it as a crime.
Now
voter fraud's a crime.
Let him get in. Go ahead. Go ahead, Cotto.
I will just say I was very specific in reading those 7 points because they had to be addressed, because the stuff Luke was bringing up was rather general, and I wanted to give some essentially some points.
It's getting a little. I just want to get a little, mix it up a little bit, but it's fine if you want to hit those points too here at the end.
Oh, no, I've already
to finish. Okay, I thought no, it's fine. I didn't know if I cut 1 or 2 off there towards the end. Go ahead.
No problem. No, I was done anyway, so all was good.
Okay, good.
Talking about abnormalities, I will give some specifics which Luke has asked for. In Georgia, the Trump lead at midnight on November the 3rd was 356,945. The Biden lead by December the 15th was 11,779. This lines up with what Basham said, because in order to create the Biden lead by December, the ballots which broke after election night, the mail-in ballots, had to be overwhelmingly, extremely, almost totally in Biden's favor, which is statistically.
Okay, so ballots that break in Biden's favor after election night, these are ballots that have been mailed in weeks, months ahead of the election. They're not mysteriously breaking. We knew for months before the election that mail-in ballots were going to favor Joe Biden, and that same-day voting was going to favor Donald Trump. So if Trump's up by 300,000 votes on same-day voting, and then as far as mail-in ballots, Joe Biden wins that. If Biden wins, 60%, 65% of mail-in ballots in Georgia, then he wins the election, which is what happened. There's nothing terribly suspicious or unusual or anomalous that Biden won, I don't know, approximately, 2/3 of the mail-in balloting in Georgia, while Trump won same-day balloting?
Abnormal, to say the absolute least. And I'll get to that in a minute in comparison to another state after I do these last three. In Pennsylvania, Trump's lead at midnight on November the 3rd was 555,189. By December the 15th, Biden had 81,600.
Okay, so this is why we were hearing about red mirage in the months before the election, because in certain swing states, such as I believe Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Republican state legislatures ruled that mail-in ballots could not be counted until after the polls closed. So therefore, you're going to initially get a Trump surge because people who voted on the day of the election were going to vote more for Trump. And then once the mail-in ballots came in, the red mirage would disappear, which is exactly what happened.
160 vote lead. Once again, in order for this to happen, virtually all of the ballots had to break in Biden's favor after election night.
No, that's not true. Only 2/3, approximately. It would vary with each state. But if Biden won approximately 2/3 of the mail-in ballots, he was going to win these swing states. It's not like 99% or 90%.
In Michigan on election night, Biden had a 293,052 vote lead. By December the 15th, he had a 154,188 vote lead. Once more, in order for this to happen, virtually all of the ballots after election night.
Okay, so it's just making assertions here. You need to provide the specific numbers, right? He's providing specific numbers of the lead, but okay, then how many ballots remain to be counted, right? You need to know that number. So let's say in Michigan, there were 2 million mail-in ballots. Then let's say Trump had a 200,000 vote advantage for same-day voting. Then you could figure out what percentage Biden would need to win the mail-in ballots. There's nothing anomalous here. Trump barely won Michigan in 2016. He barely lost Michigan in 2020. Right? He didn't have all sorts of counties, changing dramatically from Trump to Biden. You just have 2 or 3 counties in these swing states changing. They were barely Trump, and they switched to barely Biden, and that was enough.
To break in Biden's favor. Finally, in Wisconsin, 112-22 votes. That was Trump's lead on election night, November the 3rd. By December the 15th, Biden had a 20,682 vote lead. I'll say it once again, in order for this to happen, virtually all ballots counted after election day had to break in Biden's favor. Now, there are...
Okay, so Joseph Cotto is repeatedly making this assertion that for Biden to win, all of these mail-in ballots have to break in his favor, but you need to know how many ballots were cast that day and how many ballots were cast in by mail. Then you can figure out on a percentage basis. Like if you want to seriously make a case for voter fraud, you have to do a little bit of work. And you go, oh, 40, we can't do any work because we might get stigmatized if we do some work about voter fraud. We might lose our Twitter accounts, right? It might take some effort. Like doing math is hard, 40. We can't be expected to do math, right? If you want to seriously make a case here for what Joseph Cotto is saying, then you need to become specific with, okay, how many mail-in ballots were there, right? So same-day voting, here are the totals. And then what are the totals for mail-in ballots, right? How many ballots came in by mail? So in Michigan or in Georgia, how many mail-in ballots were there? So let's say there were 2,500,000 mail-in ballots. Then if Trump holds, say, 150,000 vote lead on same-day voting, and there are 2,500,000 mail-in ballots to come in, Biden doesn't have to win 99%. He doesn't have to win 90%. He doesn't have to win 80%. He doesn't even have to win 70% or even 60%. If he just wins about, 55% of mail-in ballots, then outstanding, he would win. But the idea that Biden might win 55 or 60%, 63% of mail-in ballots, that's hardly shocking. You expect more Democrats to vote by mail than Republicans.
Several questions about the ballots, which we'll get to in a little bit. But right now, I'd like to compare this to another state, Florida. In Florida, there was no red mirage.
And Ultra Testosterone, with his acute reasoning, says, Ford is like, well, they changed the rules, bro, illegally, so it's cool. I didn't say anything about that. Where did they change the rules illegally? Right? They changed the rules legally. You may not like that, but just because you don't like the way they changed the rules, that doesn't make it illegal. I know you think, oh, I don't feel good about this particular legal development, ergo it's illegal. I don't feel good about the way that mail-in ballots and curing mail-in ballots if there's like a mistake. I don't like the way they changed the rules because of my feels, bro. I got feels here, therefore it's fraudulent. Look, your feelings don't make for fraud, all right? So you may not like the way the rules were changed. You may not like that the Democrats were simply more effective in this election than the Republicans, but just because your feels are disturbed and just because you get a little ache in your tummy and just because you get a little tingle in your head and the beginnings of a headache when you think about how the Democrats were simply more effective in changing rules in their favor in this election, right? Just because you don't feel good about something, that doesn't make it illegal. That doesn't make it fraudulent. That doesn't make it a crime. You know, I apologize, Ultra Testosterone, if I have not always been as sensitive to your feelings as I should be. But your upset feels are not a strong argument for voter fraud.
Because the mail-in ballots were counted as they were received. Not necessarily as they were received, but they were counted by and large before Election Day. So then the Election Day votes were just added to that. Florida reported its results comprehensively with the exception of 1 or so percent.
Okay, so he's making my point here that Florida did not require that the counting of mail-in ballots had to wait until the close of same-day voting. I believe that's the point he's made. So different states have different rules. Sometimes different counties have different rules. We have a somewhat chaotic voting system that is primarily staffed and operated by volunteers. And they do make a lot of mistakes. But making a mistake is not the same as criminal fraud.
By about 10 p.m. Eastern time. And in that case, when the ballots were, when just the pre-election day ballots were considered, Biden was not leading astronomically. As a matter of fact, it was very, very close. And the New York Times' swingometer, which I was looking at the time, from the media showed that Trump was ahead. And as such, Trump did win the state by almost about 2.5 times what he won it by in 2016.
All right, now, go ahead. Let Mr. Ford get in there and respond. Go ahead, Mr. Ford.
Okay, so there was a difference in the way that Florida dealt with mail-in ballots compared to other swing states. So different states have different standards for dealing with mail-in ballots. So there was not a red mirage in Florida precisely for the reason that Joseph Cotto said, that Florida counted the mail-in ballots along with the same day ballots. The other swing states, such as Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, they counted the mail-in ballots after the close of polling. So and so my good friend Laponius says, if it's legal for billionaires to decide the outcome of an election, then we do not have a democracy. Okay, where's the evidence that billionaires decided the outcome of the election? If you're alleging that billionaires decided the outcome of the 2020 election, then why didn't they decide the outcome of the 2016 election? Why didn't they decide the outcome of the 2004 election? Why didn't they decide the outcome of the 2000 election? Why didn't they decide the outcome of the 1988 and 1984 and 1980 and 1972 and 1968 election? How is it if the election doesn't go your way, then it's like, oh, billionaires stole it. But bro, the Time article provides zero evidence that there was anything illegal done. K-Max McDonald, welcome K-Max McDonald. Ethan Ralph is a great moderator. He allows both sides and does not show bias. Yes, he is a great moderator. So I read the Time article. I read it fairly carefully. Now, 40 makes mistakes. 40 misses things. Show me chapter and verse in the Time article where it provides evidence that they did something illegal. Right, banding together to try to ensure that an election in difficult circumstances comes off as efficiently and effectively as possible, that's not illegal. Like changing the rules on what constitutes a valid mail-in ballot, that's not illegal. You may be upset by the way they changed the rules, but you getting upset about the way they changed the rules, you may be upset that the Democrats had a more effective campaign, that they encouraged people to mail in their ballots. That you don't like something does not make it illegal or fraudulent. K-Max McDonald says billionaires were not as united in 2016 as they are now. It used to be a mixture of right and left. Big tech is all leftist. I feel there are not many right-wing billionaires anymore. I think there's quite a lot to what you're saying. K-Max, I think it's just somewhat overstated. But yes, the Democratic Party used to be the party of the working man, and the Republican Party used to be the party of the country club business executive, and the two sides have switched. So now Republicans are the party of the working man. Democrats have become the party of the elite. Luke, it's like it's legal, bro. They change stuff without legislature. Guess what? A lot of the rules that are effectively control the way this country is run, they're not rules passed by the legislature. They're rules effectively instituted by the bureaucracy. Now, technically, legally, the bureaucracy cannot create rules. But what happens in the real world, in all industrialized countries, there's no alternative but to have the bureaucracy creating rules. And then you can't sue the bureaucracies, generally speaking. If you have a bad experience with the DMV, you can't sue the DMV. If you don't, bureaucracies, they technically don't write rules, but in effect, they write rules. And they write rules that, generally speaking, are not subject to legal scrutiny. And generally speaking, they're not subject to legislative scrutiny. Generally speaking, they're not subject to executive scrutiny. We have the bureaucrats, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, they write the rules. And if they don't, like, what's the alternative? Legislatures can never get specific enough with their laws. So you may think, oh, this sucks, 40. Effectively, the bureaucrats are writing many of the laws. They just don't call it writing laws. But these unelected bureaucrats were not subject to judicial review. 40, they're not subject to legislative review. 40, DMV is not even subject to executive review. You've got these unelected bureaucrats who are running our lives. 40, this is outrageous. Well, maybe that's the way it's done throughout the industrialized world. There's no alternative. I wish there was alternatives. I hope there could be alternatives. And technically, yeah, bureaucrats can't write rules. In effect, bureaucrats write the rules. They just don't call it writing the rules. They simply provide interpretations of what the legislatures pass. Whoa. Okay, guys, we should let Luke play more of the debate now. I have super chats upcoming. Anyone who says they must protect the election, they must win, is a totalitarian and not democratic in the least. All right, it's not a crime to say we must protect the election. You need to provide chapter and verse, Laponius, of where they behaved illegally. They successfully pressured social media companies to take a harder line against disinformation, and they used data-driven strategies to fight viral smears. That's not illegal. You may not like it, but that you don't like it doesn't make it illegal. All first world countries have a more honest system than the United States. Okay, like which countries and how are they more honest? Do you have evidence that they were suppressing actual disinformation and not suppressing the opposition? It's not illegal for private companies to suppress certain points of view. All right? So you don't like results does not make it illegal. There is no alternative to having bureaucrats writing laws. Laughing my ass off. Okay, give me examples of industrialized countries that don't, in effect, have bureaucrats writing laws. I'm waiting. Name them. Name me industrialized countries that don't, in effect, have bureaucrats writing laws. Okay, I'm listening. I'm waiting. Come on, hit me. Give me examples of first world industrialized countries that don't, in effect, have bureaucrats writing rules. There aren't any. That's how bureaucracies operate throughout the industrialized world. So Laponi is just saying that, yeah, it's illegal during an election for social media companies to suppress points of view. Where? Okay, if it's illegal, then why haven't there been effective lawsuits mounted on it? Luke is arguing that media is all left-wing, which shapes people's perceptions of Trump. I do realize you feel the media does not have this effect as much. Trump barely lost. Okay, if 50,000 votes had gone a different way, Trump still would have won the 2020 election, despite the elites being against Trump by about a 90-10 margin. If Trump had simply sounded competent with regard to COVID. Not actually done anything different, but if he'd simply come across as competent, he would have won the election. Billion-dollar tech companies not easy to sue. They're not easy, right? Doing monumental things is not easy, right? It's not easy for me to stand up day in and day out and say things that can get me in trouble, right? It's not easy to do all sorts of heroic things, right? It's not easy to bring lawsuits, but I mean, there are plenty of billionaires like Peter Thiel who will fund a valid case if you've got a strong case. You can't be heard, bro. It's legal. Yeah, it is legal. You may not like that it's legal for Facebook to decide what points of view can be expressed on its platform. I may not like that it's illegal for Twitter to decide which points of view can be expressed on its platform, and say for YouTube and the rest of big tech. It's legal to suppress points of view. It is. What's the alternative? Like, which countries have it better in this regard? I certainly believe that there are countries that do some things better than the United States. I'm not like, oh, America, uber alles, man. America's just better than all other countries in absolutely everything, man. Go America. No, not at all. I'm sure you can pick a country here, a country there that does certain things better than the United States. But overall, like, which country consistently does things better than America? I mean, there may be such countries, like Japan seems like an awesome country, but 21st century is going to be the American century, just like the 20th century was the American century. There aren't these enormous anomalies that Joseph is alleging. And if you want to see like a more... And Laponia says, lots of people have tried to sue the Southern Poverty Law Center and they always lose. Okay, so Southern Poverty Law Center is more effective than its opponents. Wow. It turns out Antifa and Black Lives Matter are more effective, better funded, they know how to play the game more effectively than the dissident right. Shocking. Turns out that organizations with more money who are able to hire better lawyers, and they generally crush those who are not as well funded and don't have as good lawyers. Yes. In life, the strong take what they want and the weak endure what they must. I would rather be strong, right? You think I got a body like this sitting around watching live streams, right? I'm into the strength, bro. I want to be strong. I don't want to just, lie on the floor and get ass raped, all right? So that's why I'm building up 40 University, so we can take back this country, right? It's better to be strong than to be weak, right? It's better to be the one who penetrates than the one who is penetrated. Now, you might say, oh, 40, I don't mind being penetrated or doing the penetrating. It's all the same to me. Love is love, bro. Right? That's not my attitude. 40 is all about the penetration. Okay? I will not lie face down, bite the pillow, and accept being penetrated. Right? I will not do that. I will stand up for what is true and good and right. Or in-depth analysis of everything that I'm saying. I footnote every single point that I'm making here tonight on my website, Luke. And Laponia says, Black Lives Matter and Antifa are more effective in the courtroom, but they still burn down those cities. Yes. Guess what? They still burn down those cities. That's the way the world works. Did you know in high school, did I ever tell you the delicate quality of my soul? Did I ever tell you the beauty of my thoughts? Did I ever let you into the sublimity of my soul in high school? And yet, I did not even get a hand job in high school. Not to mention no blowjobs. 40 received no blowjobs in high school. I did not even get a hand job, and my soul was superlative. Right? I was such a wonderful human being. I was like an exemplar for teenage America, and I didn't even get a hand job. All right? Guess what? A lot of mean, nasty guys who are not nearly as sensitive and spiritually advanced as myself, they weren't just getting hand jobs, they were getting blowjobs, and they were having full-on sexual intercourse. And they were like mashing girls' breasts together. They were just going to town, mate. And they didn't read nearly as many books as I did. They did not have the same commitment to the high standards of journalism that I did. They just were brutal players of football or basketball or baseball, or they really knew how to party, or they really knew how to talk to women. And they were getting sucked and pucked and plucked and ducked, and they were having a great time. Like, the world's not fair, all right? Just because your soul is so beautiful, it does not mean that you then get the money and the checks, right? Does not mean if you write wonderful poetry that you get money for nothing and checks for free, right? It's unfair, 40, that they're burning down cities and yet they're still winning in court. Yes, that's how the world works. In high school, guys who are jerks were getting laid while supreme gentlemen such as myself, right? 19th century Victorian gentleman, just an old-fashioned Victorian gentleman like myself, who was always treating women with the utmost respect, all right? I did not even get a hand job. Well, these brutes, these beasts, these animals, right? They were just getting tossed off left and right. Like were women throwing their clothes off, at the beauty of Ford's penetrating journalism in high school? No, it didn't happen. It's an unfair world. You can burn down cities, you can be a brute, you can be an animal, and you may get more sexual and financial and social and status rewards than the morally elevated person like myself. I wish reality wasn't this way, but it is. Ford.net. You can look at the statistics, you can look at the sources, you can compare and contrast. So it's not at all that Biden needed to win 99% of mail-in ballots. If Biden simply, if Trump is up by 50,000 votes, prior to the counting of mail-in ballots, and you're wondering, what the heck is ultra testosterone saying? And ultra testosterone says, I guess as long as non-elected judges can change law unilaterally, it's cool, bro. Guess what? It has nothing to do whether it's cool or not. It's the way the world works. Now, do I wish that the world behave differently? Yes, I wish the world behaved differently. But I'm talking about reality. The world behaves differently. The Reichstag fire decree was legal. Why are you complaining? The Reichstag fire decree was legal. You can complain all you want. Your sensitive feelings may be perturbed, but that doesn't make the case that the Reichstag fire decree was illegal. I guess it was legal when Hitler killed people in Nazi Germany, bro. Yeah, it was legal. You may not like it. Bro, that Time magazine reads like Communist Manifesto Part 2. Come on, man. Right, where does it provide evidence for illegal behavior? But they still burned down the cities despite the outcome of the cases. That's my point. Yes, they did. And guess what? Those mean, nasty guys in high school who weren't nearly as spiritually and religiously and morally and journalistically sophisticated as myself, they were getting laid left and right, and they had more social status than I did. And they made more money at their summer jobs than I did. So the race does not always go to the ones with the spiritual qualities. Now Ford is arguing doing illegal crap by force is good. I haven't said anything about what's good and what's bad here. I'm talking about the way the world works. Court cases don't determine reality. Yes, they do. Court cases sometimes sentence people to death, right? People who've been sentenced to death and the execution is being carried out. Yeah, court cases do determine reality. Our whole lives have been transformed by the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1965. Right? Now we've got these vast HR bureaucracies, primarily staffed by women, and all big businesses have to try to follow the suggestions of the bureaucrats. So the bureaucrats, they can't technically legally pass laws. All they can do is say, well, if you do X, Y, Z, and you establish an HR department and you promote diversity and inclusion and affirmative action, then you'll be less likely to be sued for discrimination and violation of civil rights acts. So yeah, court cases determine frequently reality. Legislation frequently determines reality. Our lives have been turned upside down as consequences of the 1965 Civil Rights Act. Ford says might is right. I haven't said anything about right and wrong. Who cares about legal? Well, it's illegal in some places to drive 56 miles an hour, and it's legal to drive 55. And yet what? You've got all these cars going down the road at 73 miles an hour, bro, in a 55 zone, and no one's getting ticketed, right? So oh, 40, this is just too complicated. You're depressing me. I just want it so that when there's a law on the books, it's perfectly enforced. And any human imperfection, I just can't deal with it, bro. It's just outrageous if there's like a 55 mile an hour speed limit, and yet people are driving at 72 miles an hour and they're not getting ticketed. And yet, bro, one day I drove down the street at 69 miles an hour and I got a ticket. It's just not fair, bro. If I break your nose and I win in court, I still broke your nose. Yes, you still broke my nose, right? The world's not perfectly fair. The legal system does not enforce perfect fairness. I have not said anything in this show, as far as I recall, about what is right and wrong. Yet everyone is interpreting what I'm saying is, oh, 40 saying this is right. 40 says this is moral. I haven't said anything about right and wrong. Now, you may, oh, 40, I don't want to understand you because what you're saying, it's too disturbing. It's too painful for me to assimilate. So I'm not going to actually hear what you say. I'm just going to let your words come in, and then I'm going to interpret them in ways completely contrary to what you're actually saying. And then I'm going to react against all these points you have not made. So that's ultra testosterone's philosophy. He's reacting against all sorts of points I have not made. So look, I get it. The reality is painful. Reality is complicated. And you prefer to live in delusion and in a dream world. And I understand that. You find it comforting to live in a delusional dream world. And like, who am I? I don't judge you, bro. Like, I hope you have happy dreams. I hope your delusions keep you warm at night. I'm interested in reality. Lawyers told my family the truth doesn't matter to them anymore. Well, guess what? For many lawyers, it does not particularly matter to them. They're not incentivized, perhaps, to pursue the truth. That's the way reality works, right? Reality does not always accord wonderful results to people who tell the truth. Frequently, you will pay a huge price for telling the truth, and it will be much more efficacious if you learn to shade the truth. I don't let court rulings determine what my observations are. I, generally speaking, don't allow court rulings to determine what my observations are either, but I recognize that court rulings often shape other people's observations and other people's behavior. Because some liberal judge lies and changes laws, it's cool. I haven't said anything about things being cool or not cool. What kind of ultra testosterone? I don't judge you that you prefer to live in delusion. I've said nothing about what's cool and what's not cool. I've said nothing about what's right and moral, right? So you're making all sorts of points about things that I have not said, have not come close to saying. If reality is the untrue, then we're in trouble going forward. I have no idea what that means. And then you get 1 million mail-in ballots. All Biden needs to do is win the mail-in ballots by about 8%.
Before I get Cotto back in on that, let me ask you this. What got you activated on this issue in the first place? Like, why are you, Well,
I thought it was an enormous issue. Like, I thought the voter fraud determined this election, or there was a good chance. And so this was just an enormous story that got my adrenaline pumping. And so I was like charging out there looking for documentation for voter fraud. I was like, wow, this election's been stolen. This is absolutely outrageous. And so I started reading. And my friend and yours, Ultra Testosterone, says, how is it delusional to have a problem with liberal judges changing laws to get Democrats to win by immoral means? Nothing delusional. I haven't said that there's anything wrong. You're welcome to all the feelings you have. I'm talking about the way reality works, right? You may be upset with the way reality works, but this is not a show where I've been passing moral judgments, right? I mean, I'm sure I've done some shows where I'm passing moral judgments. To the best of my understanding of the past 64 minutes, I haven't passed any moral judgments on anything. I haven't said that any court case is cool or uncool. I'm just trying to uncover the way reality works. I'm not passing moral judgments on how reality works. And Ultra Testosterone says, I guess it's legal to cheat. Well, it all depends by what you mean by legal and what you mean by cheat. Luke 4 says it's cool. I haven't said anything about cool or uncool. So I don't know what show you're listening to. It's certainly not this one. If reality is determined by court rulings and not by actual events, we are in trouble. Some parts of reality are determined by court rulings. So if a court sentences you to death and then the system carries out that execution, that part of reality is determined by a court ruling. Other parts of reality are not determined by a court ruling. If a court rules that it is illegal to note that some groups are more intelligent than other groups, that does not determine the facts on the ground, but it may determine how people get to speak in certain situations. Would I have OJ over for dinner? A judge said he's not a maniacal killer. No, I don't think I would. Oh, you're mad that Buck versus Bell enabled sterilized people? That's just reality. I'm not getting mad here about any aspect of reality unless it's in some kind of joking format. So there are lots of shows that will help you get mad. All right. So I'm working in a genre where the rules are present a distorted picture of reality and enable people to get really, really mad. So I understand those are the rules of this genre. Give people a distorted understanding of reality and then fire up their anger and resentment. Right? That's basically almost the entire right-wing punditocracy. That's right-wing talk radio. That's Fox News. Look, Fox News, New York Post, these are tabloids, right? And so they have a certain business formula. You tell people that they're a victim. So I understand pretty much every other right-wing show in this genre will tell you, bro, you should be mad. You're getting screwed over. You're a victim. This is outrageous. This is not cool. I don't do that very often. Right? I'm just here to try to understand how reality works. This is not a show about hate porn, right? There are tons of shows out there that will give you all these reasons why you should be outraged, why you should be upset, why you should feel victimized, why you'll be told, oh, the system's out to screw you over. Let's get really, really mad. This is outrageous. That's not the show I do. Now, it's the genre I work in. So I realize I'm a genre-bending bloke. Right? My parents gave birth to and raised a genre-bending bloke. So pretty much every other right-wing show of which I'm aware, they will come in and give you 15 reasons why you should be upset, 12 reasons why you should be angry, 13 reasons why you're a victim, 57 reasons why the system is out to screw you over, 21 reasons why court rulings are not cool, 51 reasons why you should get mad at the Dems, bro. That's not this show. This show is about trying to understand how the world works. Come on, man. 40 and OJ sitting on the couch, eating kosher popcorn, watching the game. Maybe a sleepover if all goes well. I guess liberal judges can change laws legally without legislation, and then it's cool. So if you're looking for a show that decides whether things are cool or not, this is not the show. I'm not aware of doing any shows about whether things are cool or not. And I do very little moralizing as far as I'm aware. Like, I may be delusional, I may be missing it. I don't do shows about, is this new legislation cool? Or are the Democrats really being moral here? OJ, what are you doing in my knife drawer, mate? Mate, no, mate. No, that's not a knife, mate. I read the allegations of voter fraud. I read the mainstream media reports. And then I said, well, wait, there are Republicans at the top of their game who have been crying about voter fraud for decades. I mean, Kris Kobach, Hans von Spakovsky, two of the leading Republicans have been crying about voter fraud for decades. So these guys, if anyone knows what's going on, these are the go-to guys that the Republicans have used for decades to make the case for voter fraud. John Fund, Wall Street Journal columnist, he wrote 2 books about voter fraud. So I said, let me go to the top, conservative scholarship on voter fraud. And I looked it up and it was so bad. It was so embarrassing. I so wanted to believe them. I looked up John Fund's book on voter fraud. On the first page, he says that the 9/11 hijackers were eligible to vote. And I knew that wasn't true. And yet that was like an allegation. That was his primary allegation on the first page. Kris Kobach, he'd argued this case. He was the Secretary of State in Kansas. He'd argued this case in court, and the judge sanctioned him for being so inept. He had to take remedial legal education.
Right.
Kris Kobach, it was just awful. I wish the Republicans had better people making that case.
All right. Go ahead, Cotto. I got off topic there, but I thought that would be an area you could discuss that too if you want. All right, go ahead.
Certainly. No, I took an interest in this. I've always had an interest in it. I've been interested in American politics for most of my life, certainly all my adult life.
Same here.
Okay, so I too have an interest in politics, I have an interest in communications, I have an interest in religion, in culture, in literature, in philosophy, in ethics. And so when I have an interest in these things, I don't go to the tabloids and tabloid style information to learn more, right? So Fox News, New York Post, the tabs, they're aimed at like a 100 IQ crowd. Most syndicated talk radio is aimed at like a 100 to 105 IQ crowd. When I'm really interested in a topic, I want to primarily find out what is the best of academic thought on that topic. So I go to Google Scholar and generally proceed from there. I go to, say, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. I'm interested primarily in what are the thoughts of people who've devoted their life to a topic, right? And people with a track record. So this is not the tabloid show. I mean, there are a ton of tabloid shows out there, shows that will, feed back to you your point of view and tell you how righteous and wonderful you are and how outrageous it is what the Dems and the media and big tech are doing. That's not this kind of show. I do a lot of work trying to get up to date on what's the latest, greatest academic research on a particular topic. So I'm not basing my shows on tabloids like the New York Post. Like, I enjoy throwing in some trash. Like, I'll throw in some Fox News excerpts, and I'll throw in some tabloid style stuff from True News, throw in a little bit of that. But my primary analysis predominantly comes from the best, the greatest, the latest from those academics who devoted their entire life to a particular topic. So that's where I come from. When it comes to voter fraud, I primarily look to academics who specialize in voter fraud. When it comes to the thought of Carl Schmitt, I primarily look to academics who devote themselves to studying Carl Schmitt. When it comes to talk radio, I look to see what's the best of academic research and scholarship on talk radio. When it comes to moral philosophy, when it comes to situationism, when it comes to Talmud study, when it comes to Bible study, when it comes to compare and contrast Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and say with regard to their attitudes towards women or their attitudes toward nationalism, I primarily consult academic sources. So it requires a little bit more effort, and it's not as sexy. I can't give you the delicious sound bites that reassure you that the way that you view the world is wonderful, and let's gin up your feelings of outrage and victimization. All right, that's not the way I operate. So my show is a little bit more intellectually challenging. It's based on the latest and greatest of academic research. It's not based on what the tabloids have to say.
And looking at various elections in the past, it's been obvious that voter fraud has been a big issue. It's typically been used by the Democratic Party because the Democrats thrive when there is a large turnout. And if they have too small of a turnout, it doesn't take a genius to see that their chances of victory go down considerably. So if they cannot get a legitimately large turnout, they expand the electorate. That's what happened. That's what's happened going back in many, many election cycles.
Okay, there's no evidence, right? You can make all the assertions in the world. You can say that illegal aliens were voting, the extraterrestrials were voting. It would have the same, the same factuality as what Joseph Cotto was just saying. You need chapter and verse, right? You need specifics. You need to document your allegations. Everything that I'm saying on this show, I specifically, carefully documented through dozens of hours of work on my website, lukeford.net. So you want to know chapter and verse and source and compare and contrast, you can find it all under the voter fraud category on my website. So I'm not just throwing out wild assertions and presenting no evidence.
I can't begin to mention them all here. Most of them are not presidential, most are local or state, but it is a problem. But talking about 2020 specifically, Luke mentioned that Florida, the situation in Florida, does not make what happened in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, as I brought up, look suspect. Well, I also bring up Ohio. In Ohio, as with Florida, the mail-in ballots were counted before election night, and so they just added the election night ballots to it. In Ohio, Biden, as with Florida, was leading Trump in mail-in ballots, but he was not leading by much. He was only leading by a few points. So when you add the ballots cast on election day to that, you get a scenario.
So I looked at all the allegations of voter fraud, all the major allegations. I got acquainted with them, and then I looked at rebuttals to the most common voter fraud claims. So let's just run through the most common voter fraud claims for 2020. One, that there were more votes than voters in Michigan, right? Completely not true. Another common allegation, more votes than voters in Pennsylvania. Again, not true. Another allegation, more votes than voters nationally. And this is in a Trump tweet. Not true. Biden won a record low number of counties. Yes, that is true, but so what? He won 17% of counties. Unexplained vote bumps in Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia. There's nothing unexplained about them. They were predicted months before the election because Biden was going to dominate the mail-in voting. That felons, minors, and the deceased were filling the voter rolls. No evidence that this was a major issue. Now, it's like, is there one example of something wrong here and one example there? Yeah, even the Heritage Foundation and its voter fraud expert Hans von Spakovsky, looking at elections since 1982, is only able to find about 1,300 examples of vote fraud. Residents who moved out still voted. Peter Navarro claimed that. No evidence for that. There was this weird pro-Biden split ticket in swing states. There was nothing weird about it. There was just a 1 in 1,000 chance of a Biden victory. No evidence for this. Trump won more bellwether counties. Okay, fine. There's no inherent bellwether status to counties. What makes a county a bellwether may well change from election to election. So bellwether counties, bellwether states reflect electoral changes. They don't start electoral changes. There was a lower rejection rate of absentee ballots. Yes, because they changed the rules to ensure that people would often have the opportunity to fix any mistakes they made in submitting a vote by mail. Missing absentee ballots, no evidence for that. And Dominion machine manipulation, no evidence for that. No evidence to support claims that election observers were blocked from counting rooms. So on Twitter and interviews, President Trump and his supporters alleged that his campaign observers were blocked from ballot counting rooms, hindering their ability to witness and report instances of what the Trump campaign has basically claimed was widespread election fraud that marred the results. Okay, these charges out basis in fact and contradicted by many of Donald Trump's own legal filings. Poll watcher complaints don't inherently amount to voter fraud. So I could have filed an affidavit that I saw somebody burning Trump ballots in Beverly Hills, right? You could not prove that I didn't see that, but that I make an affidavit of that allegation is not particularly strong evidence. Okay, that someone swears out an affidavit that they saw something is not in and of itself strong evidence. No. Georgia election workers did not kick out observers and illegally count suitcases of ballots. So this is probably the most talked about example of purported voter fraud in the 2020 election. Video presented by Rudy Giuliani, promoted by the Trump campaign, purports to show Georgian election workers illegally counting suitcases full of ballots after election observers had been told to leave. Video itself does not prove this claim. There's nothing in the video that shows fraudulent activity. There were no instructions for observers to leave. There were no suitcases full of ballots. The bins in the video were standard ballot containers. The footage shows normal tabulation processes. Nobody was told to leave. Some observers exited after election workers responsible for opening the envelopes and verifying the ballots had finished their job, and some election workers went home for the night. Other election workers kept going.
Where Trump winds up winning, obviously. So you would have to believe, if Luke's theory is correct, that Florida and Ohio just happen to have pre-election day mail-in balloting that was so disproportionately Trump favored that there was some break-off of inexplicable proportions between Florida and Ohio, the trend there, and Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And I will be the first to say that Florida is not a microcosm of the U.S. Ohio used to be somewhat of that, but neither state is now. I'm not claiming that. I don't think Trump won the popular vote by any stretch of the imagination nationally. But what I do think is that there is such a disconnect between what happened in Florida and Ohio with mail-in ballots before election.
Bro, if you're not dating trans women, then you're just transphobic. Come on, man.
Today, relative to mail-in ballots counted in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. You could also add Nevada to that after Election Day. That it would be absurd to believe that somehow Florida and Ohio were on a radically different track than these other states. It simply doesn't make sense.
I want to ask you this, and I never really thought about it just now, but do you think Trump kind of hurt his efforts? You're saying you're right, and there was a big-time fraud here, or, something that would have affected the outcome of the election. Do you think Trump hurt himself by claiming that also in 2016? If you'll remember, they set up a big voting commission and all this stuff, and he was saying that all these illegals voted, millions and millions, basically, to try to throw doubt on the outcome of the popular vote, which you just said, at least for 2020, you don't question. But he did question it in 2016 quite vociferously, actually, and I just wonder if that maybe – what do you think maybe that kind of harmed him later on down the line when it was more serious, when he lost, he was losing the presidency, right? He really needed to turn it around.
Well,
and Ultra Testosterone screaming in the chat, the video shows them, telling them to leave, bro. Like, there's a video that shows this. All right, look, you get your information from videos. And I don't judge you. You want a video cartoon version of reality. Like, you find that more entertaining, right? The Torah says, do not follow your eyes after which you prostitute yourselves. If you want to understand this stuff, you got to read books, bro. You got to read academic papers, right? You need to become familiar with social science methods. Now, you might say, that just takes too much effort. I just want to watch, outrageous hate porn on Twitter and then claim that I have some expertise from doing that. But if you want to step out of the world of illusion, step into the world of reality and learn how the world really works, then you got to read books. You got to read academic papers. You got to do hard work. Now, I realize you don't have time for that. You just want to look at Twitter and just want to get your hate porn on.
Democrats claimed voter fraud in 2016 as well. So, I mean, it was something done on both sides. They obviously claim
True, they claim it all the time too. Yeah, that's a very excellent point. They called Bush illegitimate, and they've done other things and not accepting results. And Trump's illegitimate, right? The Russians put him in, and that's a very good point. That they act like it's an attack on democracy now, etc. And we've never seen anything like this, but they've engaged in similar behaviors. That's a very fair point. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, without question, Nate.
And Laponia says, come on, bro, why don't you team up with Vosh? So tell me some positions that I have in common with Vosh. So I'm right-wing, which means that I accept hierarchy is normal, natural, and healthy. I'm right-wing because I accept that the traditional ways of organizing people are usually better than newfangled ways. So I'm right-wing in that I support only marriage between a man and a woman, biological man and biological woman. I guess I'm right-wing because I don't believe that people can change their sex. All they can do is mutilate themselves. I'm right-wing in that I accept that different groups have different gifts. I'm right-wing in that just because you have differential life results between different groups does not mean that there's discrimination. So what are some ideological positions that I have in common with Bush? So I'm not aware of them.
They have. And, Trump did claim what he claimed in 2016. Did him say that millions of illegals voted, did that damage his credibility for the bizarre events of 2016? All things being equal, absolutely. But at the same time, nowadays in American politics, I don't think people are really interested in equal standards. I think that most people are generally partisan for their side or the other. Sure. So even if Trump had been very, centered and balanced about 2016, I don't think it would have made any difference if people say in 2020 that his claims are absurd and bizarre. But certainly on an intellectual plane, his 2016 claims were not the best. But I just don't think they had much.
That's a fair point. I'll let Ford get in here on that. Now, on that, and also just, kind of what we were talking about there too, between the two parties kind of going back and forth on some questionable tactics. I mean, these are end of republic type atmosphere, at least in my opinion. I don't know what you think about that, but you can weigh in on that.
And Laponia says the United States is rife with corruption at all levels. Well, I certainly believe the United States is more corrupt than it was 10 years ago. And more corrupt than it was 20 years ago, more corrupt than it was 30 years ago, and more corrupt than it was 40 years ago. But which other nations do vastly better? And I believe there are nations that do better with with regard to corruption. The United States certainly has some problems, and it's certainly heading in some negative directions in some ways. So I see that we have steadily had less social cohesion over the past 50 years. We've steadily had less social trust. We've had more polarization. We are more untrustworthy with regard to different groups, that we feel less in common with each other. And we are in more diverse areas. We're retreating much more. We're not as socially involved. We're not volunteering as much. So there are many very serious downward trends in the United States. Where I differ from those on the hysterical right is that I don't believe it's all over. I don't believe that America's doomed. I don't believe that, we're just all going to hell. There are many negative trends in the United States. There are positive trends. Have I told you about how I can have the entire decline and fall of the Roman Empire on my Audible, and I can listen to that as I walk down the street on my phone? Have I ever mentioned that wonderful aspect of reality? Have I mentioned to you that I can often buy 3 Audible credits for $35? So look, we can concentrate on, okay, we've got less social cohesion, we've got less social trust, we've got more corruption. All right, we've got less government efficiency. We suddenly feel increasingly alienated from our neighbors. But bro, we can get 3 Audible credits for $35, so you can't have everything, bro.
And then we can take it back to the specifics of the alleged fraud and stuff.
Yeah, I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. The Dallas Cowboys lost 2 heartbreaking Super Bowls to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 1970s. And the second of those Super Bowls, the 35-31 defeat, you could make a very strong case that, bad pass interference calls cost the Dallas Cowboys the Super Bowl. So it is the natural human instinct when your team loses, whether it's politics or sports or whatever it is, the natural human instinct is to say, yeah, out of all the leading intellectuals today, I think I probably feel more aligned with that of poor Gottfried than anyone else. If I had to place myself in a particular ideological camp, I suppose I would say paleoconservative. Say that the judging, the officiating, the system was somehow rigged against you. So I understand that human impulse. Also, a feeling of victimhood increases in-group solidarity. So the Democrats crying fraud and then mounting a special prosecutor to investigate Donald Trump for possible collusion with Russia probably was and Laponia says, hey, Mr. Ford, if they were waiting for mail-in ballots to come in, how were they calling Democratic states much quicker than Republican states? So I'm not really up to date, shockingly, on all the metrics and social science methods that go into calling a state one way or another. I assume that they look at votes that were conducted on that same day, and then they had, I assume, polling that would predict how the votes that same day aligned with the polling versus how many votes were outstanding and from which counties and what were the Democrat to Republican trends in those counties. Are you shocked that I'm not really up to date with all the mechanics of calling states? Remember Joseph Cotto, this was a highlight for one of my friends. The highlight of election night was Joseph Cotto calling Florida for Bush. And how was Joseph Cotto able to do that hours before the networks? Effective tactic to hamstring the Trump administration for its first 3 years. Also, the in-group solidarity that you get from making these accusations can be very powerful. When you your group is very easy to convince that it's been victimized, and when you do that, you do increase in-group solidarity. So Republicans now believing that the 2020 election was stolen, this comes with some, positive byproducts for them in that it will increase their solidarity. It will make them more resistant to the Biden agenda, and people will feel more esprit de corps. So there's certainly a lot of positive benefits to making, let's just say that both cases were factually lacking, both the Democrats crying fraud in 2016, the Republicans in 2020, but you still often get benefits from saying things that are false. Now, did Trump hurt his credibility with a lot of outrageous claims for which he provided no evidence? Yes, he obviously hurt his credibility. And even more so, none of the Republican A-League lawyers would touch any of these election challenges. None of the Republican B-League lawyers would touch any of the 2020 challenges. So when you try to understand what's going on, often people make sense of the way the world works by just looking at who's lining up to take on a certain case. And the Republican A-League and B-League of the legal team would not. And ultra testosterone writes, Luke Ford is basically screw the morals. No, you can't do everything. So let's say I was married and I was just really giving it to my old lady. Would you say, oh, Ford is saying screw the morals because he's not thinking about morality right now. All he's thinking about is making savage love to his wife, right? Just because I do a live stream where I don't happen to focus on morality, that's not saying screw morality. It means I'm just leaving morality out of this particular live stream. To get clarity on some things, you have to abstract out certain elements and look at them more carefully. So there are all sorts of live streams and radio shows and TV shows that you can tune into which will tell you what's moral and what's immoral about the news, right? So Dennis Prager is much better at that than I am. And Sean Hannity, like you'd love Sean Hannity. He will tell you how outrageous everything is that the Democrats do. So I am not doing very many live streams where I'm primarily complaining about what's cool and what's not cool, what's moral and what's not moral. I do have opinions on morality. I'm just not happen to be focusing on that right now. The primary focus of my live stream, to the best of my knowledge over the past 3.5 years, is how does the real world work? The primary focus of my live stream has not been, well, are these aspects of what's happening in the real world, are they moral? Are they cool, bro? Is it cool that the Chinese are genociding the Uyghurs? That's not this live stream, right? You're making a genre mistake, right? If you're coming here primarily to find out what's moral and what's immoral in the news, you're going to be sorely disappointed, right? This show has not primarily been about that. There are lots of shows who will tell you what's cool, what's not cool in the news. They will tell you their opinions on what's moral and what's immoral in the news. That's not this show. It's a genre mistake. Not touch any of these 2020 challenges while the Republican A-League was there totally to support George W. Bush in 2020. Also, another way that you try to make sense of a confusing world is you look for people who are shifting or people who are in the middle. Well, Ford, say you don't care about morals. Because I choose not to do a show about morals does not mean I don't care about morals. There are all sorts of things that I care about that I don't talk about on this show. Like I have friends who I deeply care about and I don't talk about them on the show. I have a life in Orthodox Judaism that by and large I don't talk about on this show. Many of the things most precious to me, I don't talk about on this show. I have exquisite, delicate, sumptuous, voluptuous feelings that I don't talk about on this show. Do you think that means I don't care about these things? Precisely the opposite. Those things that are most precious to me, frequently, I don't talk about on this show. Right? There is the realm of the sacred. There is the realm of the intimate. Right? There is the burning hot core of my life inside Orthodox Judaism, which by and large, I don't talk about on this show. The things that go on between me and my family and my relatives and my friends, by and large, I don't talk about on this show. So most of the things most precious to me, I don't talk about on this show. So just because I don't talk about my relationship with my brother, I don't talk about my relationship with my stepmother, I don't talk about my relationship with my sister, I don't talk about my relationships with various rabbis, that doesn't mean that they're not important to me. It's the very opposite. Those are realms that are sacred that I'm not going to dissect and make public. So just because I don't talk about something on a show does not mean that I don't care about it. and seeing how they're shifting. So Reagan, for example, he passed his big tax cut in 1981. He passed his budget. He managed to pass his most influential forms of legislation in the 1980s by getting Southern Democrats to come on side. Now, what's striking about the 2020 electoral fraud is that nobody who's nonpartisan and nobody from the Democrats is coming on side. Even many Republicans have rejected these fraud allegations. So normally, if you have a good case to make, you can get people in the middle, and you can even get people. So, question in the chat: when was I last outside the LA bubble? I think it's been years. I have a wonderful life in many ways. I'm able to save some money. I've been able to pay off my debts. I'm able to buy all the books I want. I'm able to buy all the Audible credits I want. I'm able to eat the food I want. I'm able to purchase all the drinks that I want. I'm able to get the sound equipment that I want. I'm able to take the courses that I want. But along with all the things that I get to do and the abundant time that I have to read books and to do these shows and to prepare for these shows and to go for lovely walks around West Los Angeles, there are some things I don't get to do. I can't afford to travel a lot. All right? So I make certain sacrifices. I like to have abundant spare time. I could spend my time earning money. Like, there are jobs I could do where I could make $50 an hour. So I could easily spend, instead of making YouTube shows, I could spend 20 hours a week earning $50 an hour, and I'd have more money and I'd do more travel. But I have such a good time doing these shows, I am choosing to do without that money so that I can have a good time doing the show. But there are certain prices paid. I don't get to travel. I don't eat out. All right. There's not much room in my budget for flying up to San Francisco or traveling to Europe or traveling to New York or staying in 5-star hotels. I can't afford to do that. I have created a life where I get to do the things that are most important to me, such as read books, to write, to do YouTube shows, to hang out with my friends. All right. So I concentrate on the things that I love. I'm able to create a life that I love, but there are certain sacrifices in the life that I love. There's not a lot of like free spending money in my budget. So I budget fairly carefully. I'm able to buy all the subscriptions I want. I subscribe to the LA Times, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, The Athletic, ESPN Plus, Netflix, Amazon Prime, blah, blah, blah. I get to have all that. I just simply don't get to have money to travel. I don't get to have money to splurge. I don't get to have money to eat out. Those things are nice, but they're not of high importance to me. So what is of great importance to me is to have the time to read and to think and to talk to people who matter to me. People are a little bit on the side against you. What's striking in the 2020 election is they could get nobody in the middle, certainly, and nobody among the Democrats as well.
All right, now let me ask this question, and I'll start off with you, Cotto, if you want to respond a little bit to that tail end there too. But I'll ask this question. Now this Golden Donut sent this before you guys got here, but I'll put it to you. By the way, thank you, Slap a Christ Cuck with the giant. Super good there. Very kind of you guys. I think this has been pretty good so far. Super good, maybe by the end. But let me read this from Golden Donut. What is there to debate? If it was stolen, Trump is weak for allowing it and shouldn't be in power. Conservatives rejected all conservative value to pander to LGBTQ, blah, 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 woke mob. And then he said they rejected God, basically, and they deserve this pretty much. Now, what do you...
So I'm trying to think when I was last out of Los Angeles. I think it might have been years. I was in Australia in 2014. And, gosh, it may be maybe 3-4 years since I've been out of LA.
You can comment on the last part or not. But the first part, that Trump, if he did get it stolen, he's a cuck for letting this happen, and he shouldn't be president anyway. Or is he going to be reinstalled? Now, that's another thing I saw Mike Lindell saying today. I don't know if you're on board with that. I don't think that's going to happen, but go ahead.
Is that for me?
Yeah, that's for you. We'll start with you. Yeah.
Okay. No, I obviously don't think Trump's going to be reinstalled. There are some people, I think Michael Lindell, who thinks he's back in office by August or some such. Yeah, I don't even pay attention to that. No, I think that the idea that Trump did not deserve to continue as president because he allowed this to happen, it really belies a very poor understanding of how American government works, because this stuff happened at the state level. And Trump cannot control what these states do as president. There's simply no mechanism for him to do so. So the idea that he allowed it to happen is rather crazy. He simply doesn't have authority over these states. Some might say, well, he should declare martial law. Obviously, that would last for 20 minutes until there was some sort of coup against him for, declaring martial law for really no good reason. So it's this perspective is really it's really far out, to say the absolute least. I will just say, when it comes to not accepting the results of an election, as Luke brought up, I obviously, I believe that the left is going to win out in this country demographically. I think it has the future pretty much sewn up. So I'm not one who thinks that, somehow my side is going to prevail and this is some, injury to its honor and I need to have some sort of in-group cohesion to cope with it. I know I'm very resigned to the fact that this country is going to become more and more like New York and California. That's not my point at all. My point is that voter fraud is a very serious problem. And if somebody thinks that what happened in 2020 is just totally legitimate, that's fine. That I think is really naive, to say the absolute least. And one last point, Luke brought up Hans von Spakovsky in a rather negative sense just before, but he was speaking very highly of Hans when Luke was on my program not too long ago. So now we've seen that Luke's had some sort of change of heart with regard to Hans von Spakovsky. Maybe it's because when I brought up in the New York Post, a very detailed expose of how Democratic voter fraud works, which used a Democratic voter fraudster anonymously, obviously, for its source material, Luke was saying, Hans von Spakovsky said this, Hans von Spakovsky said that, to refute what I was saying. And then at the end, I brought up Hans von Spakovsky's endorsement of the article. So if this would indicate that Luke has had a change of heart on Hans's analyses, if what he said tonight would indicate as much, then obviously I think we all should question exactly the consistency of Luke's perspective here.
All right, now he's questioning your consistency, Mr. Ford. Go ahead.
Yeah, there must be a certain listening comprehension problem that Joseph may have in this particular instance. On his show, I was saying even this huge clown, Hans von Spakovsky, just absolute buffoon. Even he, this full-time heritage scholar who's created the Heritage Foundation Fraud Index. All right, even this buffoon who's devoted his life to try to make the case for a massive amount of voter fraud in the United States, even he's only able to document 1,328 cases of voter fraud since 1982. So that's over 1 billion ballots cast. And even this clown, even this right-wing propagandist, and I have no problem with the right wing. I consider myself right-wing, but this guy is such a low level. I mean, when he testifies in court, he admits that he doesn't know anything about social science methods for analyzing statistics with regard to voting. He's completely out of touch with the field. And even this buffoon who goes around writing books on voter fraud, and he's on all the nationally syndicated radio shows. He's always going on Fox News as an expert on voter fraud. This expert on voter fraud is only able to come up with 1,328 cases since 1982. That's like 0.0001% of ballots cast over the past 40 years. And if that's all you can come up with, that's a really weak case. Now, my main point is not that the 2020 elections were perfectly on the up and up. My main point is that all those who try to make the case that there was significant voter fraud in 2020 have done a really terrible job. And so why does any of this matter? Well, one, this is kind of fun. This is like a game of chess or basketball. So we're comparing, our best sources of information and values against each other. And so it's like a fun contest. It speaks to various people's credibility and ability to read reality without their emotions clouding their judgment. And second, voter fraud is an important issue. If there is significant voter fraud, then it needs to be found. If I got information in tonight that revealed that there was substantial voter fraud in the 2020 election, or a good chance of it, I would be all over that story. If I could establish this, that there was significant voter fraud in the 2020 election, the rest of my life would be made. I'd be on Easy Street. I'd be a millionaire. I'd be a hero of the Republic. I'd be flown all around the country. I'd be sleeping with gorgeous women. Like, I would be a hero. Anyone who's able to substantiate any of these wild accusations would be a hero. But all these people who say that they think there might have been significant voter fraud in 20, none of them are able to substantiate it, even though they've got everything to gain. The world will be handed to you on a platter if you establish this. You'll be rich. You'll be famous. You'll be, flooded with women. Why, if you think the voter fraud was significant in 2020, then make a serious case. All the cases were just thrown out. They're terrible. They're pathetic. It's just sad.
All right. He said it's your side, Cotto, with your argument here about the voter fraud. What do you say to that?
Well, I will just say one thing first. In the discussion I had with Luke, he did not call von Spakovsky a buffoon. He brought him up as an authority on voter fraud scholarship. If people want to see the discussion, I highly recommend that they go to Google, type in Cotto, Gottfried, Rumble, scroll down to the chat I have with Luke Ford, and they will have to go through it a bit to get to the point where we start discussing voter fraud, but they'll see what Luke said there, and they can draw their own conclusions. I'm just going to leave that there. It is what it is. What I will say with regard to voter fraud is that Luke seems to believe that this is something that people do with the intention of getting caught, or they do it in such a slipshod manner that they inevitably get caught. The whole point of voter fraud is that it's fraud. People are engaging in an activity which is inherently illegitimate, and they try to cover it up so they're not held to account for it. That's where the New York Post expose of Democratic voter fraud comes in. We heard a whole bunch of crazy conspiracy theories about Dominion, Smartmatic, blah, blah, blah. But that's not what the voter fraud, that's not what it is at all. What it is Democrats simply manipulating ballots in order to expand the electorate artificially in their favor, because, as I said before, when the turnout is larger, they typically win. So, looking at voter fraud, the idea that absence of evidence is evidence of absence is crazy. I mean, this is like saying that a jewel heist didn't happen because there's no security camera footage of it. It's just, it's really, it's rather bizarre. And whether or not people get glory from exposing voter fraud is their own issue. I really can't speak to anyone's, personal motivations here. What I will say is that's a big problem. And the Democrats very much want to see H.R. 1 passed, which I'm sure we all are familiar with that. It's something that would create voter ID free, among many other things, voter ID free mail balloting across the country. And so people then would just be able to send in a ballot by claiming there's someone who they're not, depending on how strict the voter integrity laws are in their state. There are many people on the rolls who are inactive voters, who are dead even, and in many states these aren't cleaned out for years. As a matter of fact, as part of H.R. 1, the Democrats mandate that the rolls cannot be cleaned out with great regularity. So obviously they're trying. That's an open invitation for voter fraud. We want people on the rolls to be eligible to have ballots cast in their name without photo ID. I mean, how much more explicit can it possibly get? So the idea that the Democrats don't benefit from this artificially expanded electorate, the idea that Florida and Ohio went one way while Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin went another way. Meanwhile, Florida and Ohio counted their mail-in ballots earlier, so fraudsters within either state didn't have the time to do what was done in those other 4 states. I mean, this is all crazy. The level of naivete that would be required to believe this stuff is off the charts. The Democrats are just doing H.R. 1 because they're nice people, I guess. Florida and Ohio just randomly went a certain way, while the other states did not. And there are more specifics I should get you about those other states. But I mean, the argument that Luke is making is really, to say that it's built on a foundation of sand is rather a compliment. I struggle to even understand what he's talking about here. And sometimes when he goes off talking about other things, as he's done in this discussion, no offense, Luke, I think perhaps it belies the lack of substance in his corner. And saying that, that voter fraud is not a big deal, you just have to look at the immense, the winner-take-all, essentially, structure of elections. Elections matter. Some people say that they don't. Some people say it's all mirage, blah, whatever. But elections do matter. And the notion that if a party could not win an election legitimately, that it would not have given the opportunity, try to win that election illegitimately, that requires, once again, naivete on such a scale that I don't even know how to describe it. It's actually astounding that anyone would believe that. I mean, this is like, toddler tier nonsense. So that's my take.
All right, now he just called you toddler tier, Mr. Ford. Now let me ask you, Cotto. He mentioned he was conservative. Do you see yourself as more conservative than Mr. Ford before we talks it over? You think yourself more right wing?
Definitely, absolutely to the right of me on social issues.
Okay.
And I'm a sociopolitical realist. My views fall all over the spectrum. They generally pull toward the right. But if you ask me about like abortion, for instance, I don't sound like any kind of conservative. So, it's my views are all over the place. But Luke is absolutely to the right of me on social issues. No question about it.
All right. Go ahead, Mr. Ford. Respond. He called you a toddler tier with your takes here.
Yeah, so obviously neither Joseph nor I are voter fraud experts. So what we're doing here is that we are bringing the best of the information that we've been able to ascertain. And so Cotto so far has come with 2 articles that have formed the basis for his critique. Patrick Bashab's piece in the American Spectator, I believe, which was just really low level. And then the other piece that he is basing his analysis on is this August 29, 2020 piece in the New York Post, which was, I mean, again, it's such a low level. It's by a guy, John Levine, who provides no evidence for any of his claims. Like you'd think you'd want to provide some evidence for these claims about the massive voter fraud, but there's no evidence in it. And Joseph, when I was talking to him, he brought the article up. I'd never heard of the article. And so he brought it up when we were discussing, I think, May 13th. And I said, I'm scrolling through it. I said, Joseph, there's absolutely no evidence presented. And he said, well, it says in the article that the New York Post has ascertained these allegations. Well, that's not enough for me. I need to see evidence. So we've got this 2020 article by a guy who's never broken any major stories, John Levine. It provides no evidence, and it's not advanced. Nobody ever advances the story. Like the story drops. All the story does is essentially repeat Donald Trump's allegations about mail-in voter fraud, and then it dies. If a story has legs, if there's substance to a story, then it'll get picked up and it'll get advanced. But the New York Post doesn't even advance the story. Nobody's able to advance the story. And as far as, I don't know how I'd ascertain people's motivations to do something about voter fraud, if you give the slightest damn about this country, you would be incentivized to do something about voter fraud. So it's not a terribly complicated issue. I don't know why people don't do anything about voter fraud. Human motivations are so complex. If you care about the United States of America just as much as my little finger, you'd do something about voter fraud and try to make a legitimate case. Now, I never said that the people who are committing voter fraud just want to be caught. Guess what? People who commit crime in general do not want to be caught. There's nothing special about voter fraud in that regard. People who commit murder, people who commit massive white-collar swindles, they don't want to get caught either. But voter fraud, when you define it as a crime, then you can ascertain how much prosecution there is of it. You can prosecute voter fraud like you prosecute any other crime. It's not terribly complicated. Yes, people try to get away with crimes. People try to get away with voter fraud. People may try to get away with white-collar crime. People try to get away with rape and murder. All right. Everyone tries to get away with their crimes. So voter fraud is not unique in that aspect. It's another crime. It gets prosecuted. So far, Hans von Spakovsky, the stalwart hero of the Heritage Foundation, is only able to find something like 1,300 cases in over 1 billion ballots cast. I mean, that's so weak.
All right, now I caught a real quick response, and then I'm going to go through some of these. We're going to take calls here in a little bit too, and then I'll give you guys. I'll turn it back over to you guys as well and give you some more time. All right, now finish up what you wanted to say there, Cotto. They'll give a little quick take.
Well, I think the whole thing that Luke is bringing up here generally boils down to this idea that there has to be evidence of voter fraud to say that it happened. Meanwhile, if one could read in that New York Post article, which he castigates, which is titled "Political Insider Explains Voter Fraud with Mail-in Ballots," it's free to read online, no paywall. The New York Post did verify the information which the fraudster who remained anonymous brought to its attention. Luke seemingly wants this fraudster to publicly identify himself in the article, for the New York Post to publish pictures of all the information it verified, maybe for the guy's social security number to be posted in the article as well. This is not how how sensitive stories of this nature are covered by the press. I used to be a columnist for the Washington Times' community page. I know that sometimes you have to use anonymous sources. I hated doing that. I very rarely did it, but some other people did it with great regularity, and it didn't mean that what they covered was in any respect inaccurate. It just meant that the people who they were talking to wanted to keep themselves free of inquiry from other members of the press, from law enforcement, whatever, and the only way they would ever go on record is to do so anonymously. Now, a Democratic voter fraud operator is not going to just give his name. He's not going to consent to his person being well known, because that would destroy his operation and would very much make him vulnerable to prosecution. So dissing the New York Post article because of that is rather bizarre. That article really does go through how the fraud is done. It's done in a host of ways. Summarizing it here wouldn't do. Perhaps later on get this in specifics. But that's my take there.
Okay. All right. Golden Donut says Trump embraced those who rejected God and was removed from power, not saving anything worth saving. I guess anything not worth saving, I guess is what he meant. Slapper Christ Cuck gifted a sub to Cooper. Thank you again, Slapper Christ Cuck, for the giant controller, the super good there. Golden Donut says, Cotto says that there's nothing Trump could have done to prevent fraud nationally, then talks about how Dems are rigging it on the federal level. Double speak. Slapper Christ Cuck gifted a sub to Jay Wallace. Also over on Entropy, K-Max McDonald says, what states to Cotto were most fishy? Arizona, ? Michigan, Pennsylvania. In Luke's defense, did Trump's legal team look into this and find nothing? Cotto and Luke argue about why they found nothing, I think. What would you say to that, Mr. Cotto?
I would say that the most, there were several states that were really strange. I would say the place that had the most, perhaps, ostentatious problem was Pennsylvania, followed by Georgia, although Nevada also was bad, and obviously Michigan and Wisconsin too. And then there were safe Democratic states where there were no real safeguards, but who really cares? Those are going to go. The problem with Pennsylvania was that the state legislature unconstitutionally changed the state's postal balloting law. So what happened then was that a whole bunch of ballots were cast illegally, and they were counted. And Trump's lawyers did take this to court, and they had a ruling favorable to them by a district court. But then the state Supreme Court overruled it, saying that essentially the timing in which the suit was filed was not sufficient. It did not rule that the law was constitutional. It totally ignored that. It just said that the timing of it was unconstitutional. And obviously a lot of places in Pennsylvania had very, very big problems with election security, how ballots were counted. There were verified dead people voting in Pennsylvania. When a lot of people pointed that out, the Secretary of State took down the website that people could use to look up registered voters. So it's really the Pennsylvania was really over the top, but Georgia was right behind it, and there were some other really bad apples as well.
All right, let's see. Over on Entropy, K-Max McDonald says, for both, to be specific, and I'll give this to Luke since he got this last one, and then you can chime in after Cotto, and then we'll get questions. Larry Ridgway is here. Larry, are you still here?
Yeah, man.
Wow. Larry
just
the King.
Man.
Listen to that voice on the kill stream. Wow, it's been a while, sir.
It's been like 2 months, man.
Dude, it's been a minute. Holy shit.
A lot has happened.
Killstream. Yeah, lots happened.
I mean, it's like chaotic. A lot of things have happened.
Yeah. I would say that's true. Larry's here. Culture War's here. So just real quick, Culture War, did you actually get banned from Trovo? They said that. I don't know if that's true. Don't answer.
Maybe he's just banned.
That's right. Don't answer.
Period.
You're right. Be quiet. Don't say anything. You're right. Okay.
Press F for Culture War.
You're right. Don't say anything. All right. Now, Luke, let me repeat this for you. For both, to be specific, but it will be for you, Luke, and then Cotto after. What is voter fraud? Illegal aliens voting, dead people, people voting 2 times, not using a voter ID, felons voting. We need specifics. I'd like Cotto and Luke to discuss this more and how often they think this occurs. Now, Luke's talked about that a little bit. He doesn't seem to, like they haven't found much according to what he said there. Now, anyway, I'll go ahead and give it to you, though. Go ahead, Luke.
Okay, so you can define voter fraud in a myriad ways. It only becomes manageable when you define it as a crime. So I'm just going to settle voter fraud is a crime. The criminal act of breaking the law with regard to casting your ballot or counting and processing ballots. And so it's a crime that gets prosecuted. Republicans have put tremendous emphasis on investigating voter fraud. They put their best legal minds on the issue for more than 2 decades, and they've come up with bupkis. They've come up with very little for the enormous amount of effort. So voter fraud is a crime, and it hasn't been much prosecuted successfully. So given the evidence that we have right now, I don't see any evidence that voter fraud has been a major issue in the United States over the past 50 years. If someone can point me to some evidence, I want to see it. I've been spending hundreds of hours reading academic papers, reading books, reading what the right wing has to say, reading what the academics have to say. I just want to see the evidence. And Joseph Cotto can say, "Oh, dead people voted in Pennsylvania." Okay, what's the evidence? What's the academic paper? What's the support? I mean, it's effortless to make these allegations. I can say that my mother went to Mars. But where's the evidence? And the New York Post article, just give me one bit of evidence. You don't have to reveal the name of the Democratic operative. Just give me one little bit of evidence. Just one little bit.
Where's the evidence, Cotto? Go ahead.
Well, with regard to the New York Post article, obviously you would have to ask the journalist, Levine, who did the article, and he's not going to give you the evidence because he collected it in a confidential context like any good journalist would, given the circumstances. Now, looking at dead people voting in Pennsylvania, I saw it myself. I saw it on the Secretary of State's website. People who were born in the 1800s who cast a ballot in September. And then the Secretary of State took down the website. That was covered very heavily at the time, not by the mainstream media, which obviously is left-leaning, but it certainly was covered by many right-leaning outlets. And I do want to bring something up here as opposed to speak to Luke's frame of reference relative to my frame of reference. Luke believes in the New York Times. He likes, as I recall, although he could correct me, the Washington Post. He believes they are superior journalistic outlets to, say, Fox News or the Epoch Times or stuff like that. I trust no source at all. My take is that they are all biased. But what I very fervently believe is that there's no inherent worth in the New York Times relative to the gateway pundit. I don't think that you can seriously say that either platform has a leg up on the truth. And because of that, I look at stuff, and if it seems sensible to me, I'm inclined to say it's more likely than not. So my perspective here on which news to trust, which news not to trust, is not based on, this publication good, that publication bad. It's based on what do the facts seem, where do the facts seem to be leaning, and that's how I'll make my argument. I will just say very quickly, Luke said, where's the evidence of the voter fraud? This goes back to somebody looking at a safe deposit box that has obviously been broken into. You could see the metal from the box thrown across the room, and you could see an empty bag that had obviously has the name of a jeweler on it, where there were some very expensive jewels, and yet there's nothing in the bag. Well, because there's no video camera evidence, because the video camera was hacked into, of somebody having broken in and taken the stuff, Luke would essentially say, in a manner of speaking, where's the evidence? There was no theft here. How do you know there was ever any jewelry in this box? Where's the proof, bro? Meanwhile, you're looking at this stuff and you're just wondering, how the hell could anybody not say that there was a theft that took place? But this is the nature of voter fraud. Voter fraud is something that's done, as people will see by reading the New York Post articles, by skilled professionals who are thieves, and they know what they're doing, generally speaking. The only reason that there was a recent voter fraud prosecution in New Jersey, as described in that Post article, is because a bunch of morons stuffed a single mailbox with hundreds of mail ballots rather than evenly distributing them throughout the city of Paterson, and that's why there was a prosecution brought. But it's done typically by very intelligent, very capable people who are career criminals. And that's why it doesn't come to light very much. These people don't leave their fingerprints. They don't leave their DNA from their saliva on a ballot. They actually have ways, as you can read in the Post article, of getting around that. And it's quite shocking stuff.
All right. Now,
hey, Ralph, before
go ahead. I want
you
to go ahead.
I was going to say, before you move on, can I ask the guest something?
Yes, you may.
All right, Mr. Cotto, you mentioned people being born in the 1800s. I was wondering, do either of you guys believe in vampires?
No, I'm afraid I don't.
No.
Vampires are pretty cool, though, if they were real.
It would be, yeah.
I mean, minus the
interview from a vampire, I thought was a true story.
They do some kind of fucked up things, though, actually. I don't know. It's cool on film. I don't know if it'd be cool if you had a vampire in your community it might not be as cool. But do you have an actual question, Larry? I was going to ask you if you had a real. I mean, that's a pretty serious question in and of itself, but.
I mean, you could have some serious problems if vampires are real. That was my question.
All right, thank you. Mustache caller, go ahead. Mustache us a question.
Boy, mate, how goes it, Ralph?
It's going good. Mustache, how you doing? Go ahead.
Yeah, we're mate over here. Thanks for taking me call. I wanted to read something from the old internet, if you would allow it.
From the internet, probably. Yeah, I don't see why I would disallow it.
All right, this is from a very wise man. Said basically here, I got 2 quotes. First, says, "My life combined banging shiksas with a study of the acidic masters. I couldn't imagine what activity without the other."
Mustache. All right, mustache. I think I know where you're. I think I know where you're going. But
it's true. It's true. That's my life. I mean, God made me this way.
All right. Now wait. At least tell us. I know where they're going. Why don't you? What is he talking about, Mr.
I thought that was an Abe Lincoln quote.
Well, look, I couldn't bang shiksas until I converted to Judaism. Like I'd just be whites with whites. So I had to convert to Judaism first before I could feel the shiksa appeal. Look, I read on the pornography industry for a decade, and it was not fair to my readers if I didn't plunge in and like really get an intimate sense of what was truly going on. It would have been just the heart of callousness if I had not sampled the ware so that I could do a little George Plimpton style participatory journalism. Like, I am not that uncaring for my readers. I owe them the truth. I need them to know what things were like. I was willing to sacrifice my honor. I was willing to tarnish my Jewish soul for the sake of my readers. I took the obloquy on me. I suffered. I'd like the prophet Hosea in the Old Testament who marries a prostitute because God tells him to. Do you think I enjoyed it when I was getting those porn star blowjobs? Do you think I was enjoying it when I was doing all that acrobatic sex with these amazingly sexy young women? I didn't enjoy that. I was like, oh my God, I'd rather be studying Talmud. I was like, oh, I wonder what the Hasidic masters have to say about this. But I was willing to do that for you guys. I didn't do that for me. I did that for you. I was willing to give up my honor for the sake of my readers so that they could understand the emes, the truth. Those are the things that I do.
All right, thank you, mate.
Yeah,
anyways, let me say something to your mate there, and then I'll come back to you, Mr. Ford. Mr. Cotto, that thing on top of your head, mate, that thing comes in second place in the competition for hat, most undersized hat, most likely to make me fucking hate you. What
are you doing? Yeah, it's interesting.
I need an answer to that. Why did you wear that thing, mate?
Like this, but it's more comfortable like this.
I don't believe you, mate.
All right, mustache.
All right, secondly, sorry, one more quote there, Ralph. Sorry for getting in a fight in the middle of the Black Panther Party.
That's all right.
Yeah, you love me, mate. Anyway, so Mr. Ford, I would reply to your reply with if any outsider came here and called our Sheilas shiksas, that's how you get fed to the fucking koalas, mate. And koalas have herpes. You don't want any part of those fucking buggers. Anyway, second quote. For the next few weeks, I find it hard to sleep. I'm used to rubbing one out in the evening to my favorite erotic themes, such as naughty teacher, casting couch, etc. In my fantasies, I'm the powerful one, and my excitement is usually proportionate to the degradation of me partner. That a teacher would risk her position in the community to get it on with me. That a married woman aspiring to become an actress would forsake her vows to get with me. That is porny heaven. And my frantic pumping is usually the most intense and pleasurable part of me disconnected life. Right. How did you get out of that without suicide, Mr. Ford?
All right, mustache. Thank you, sir.
It took a lot of prayer, but I've been like 8 years no fap. But prior to that, I was pretty frantic with my fapping at times.
8 years. That is quite a run there. Master of his domain, indeed. All right, now, Gottfried Bama says Larry is back. Yes, that was a Seinfeld reference. Gottfried Bama says Larry is back. Larry is back. That was.
Hell yeah, brother. And I got this. I'm here with the serious questions. I got to bring some sort of serious decorum back to the program here.
Terry J says, Larry, who do you think is right? No, don't say that. Then he says, fancy hat guy or fancy accent man. Hank Scorpio says, Luke doesn't have the makings of a varsity athlete, which I don't know what that means or is in reference to, but it's probably some inside joke. I don't know. Slab by Christ Cut gifted a sub to Night Flyer. Thank you, Slab by Christ Cut. And then let's see. Henry Ford Lives says, this goy is great. This goy is great. And then he says, ha, 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 ha. All right. We have another caller question. Snow Dog, go ahead. Snow Dog.
You're Snow Dog millionaire.
Oh my God! Silent Snow Dog. Snow Dog. Snow Dog, come on, man. Oh, you're on your phone. Well, it won't work. Discord on the phone sucks donkey dick. I don't know what the fucking problem is, but Butters, what's up? Butters, God, what? Let me guess, you're using your phone too. The fuck?
No, please.
Oh my God, Butters, this is a sad day. I didn't think Butters.
Wait, there it is.
All right. By the way, we have a killstream.live/tip that I'm about to read from Mr. Ford, and those flash across the screen now. Go ahead.
So it's the day of the pillow. It's not. No, it's not.
No, it's not. Go ahead, Butters. What do you got? Go. Let's go.
Well, it's an exciting debate, and I just want to comment. I think the strongest case of the shenanigans that went on in 2020 is the Times article that literally said this is the campaign to fortify the 2020 election.
Yeah, what do you say about that? What do you say about that, Ford? That was made a big deal.
I read that very carefully, and I saw all these conservative morons were going, oh, yeah, they're admitting they were fixing the election. They said that there was a campaign in Time magazine to fortify the election, to make the election safe and legal, and there was nothing in it about fraud. Now, you may not like how it was conducted, but that doesn't mean it was illegal. Now, maybe I missed something. I thought I read the article carefully, but if you can show me evidence in that article that shows that the Democrats or people supporting them engaged in illegal behavior, then, I'm an idiot and I'll slap myself and say I was wrong. I saw nothing in that article, which I read very carefully, that said they did anything illegal. Now, that they won, that they manipulated the rules of the game. Yeah, they seem to have played the game more effectively than the Republicans. Yes.
Well, but that kind of admission is that they do rig elections, but they call it fortification.
That's no evidence that they did anything illegal. If they're doing legal things that you don't like, that doesn't make it voter fraud. I mean, you can call it voter fraud, and you can get your fellow conservative or right-wing people, whatever, to consider it voter fraud, but it's not a crime. There's nothing in that article that's saying they were committing a crime. Now, you may think it's criminal because it's so outrageous, but they were fulfilling their agenda, and they seem to have been more successful at it than the Republicans. So it's really important to be effective, and they seem to have been effective.
Yes, but I find this to be a public-private. Well, I think the distinction, but it's like when you realize that these are powerful actors happening. When they describe it as a shadowy cabal, it just kind of seems less suspicious. Like this is the system lecturing us with its cathedral, how it manipulates procedural outcomes to get the things they want. And it seems to me that, like, in the end run, elections really don't matter. If you have people more powerful than the president, companies even, why even run for president? Why even vote in the system if they can just manipulate the procedural outcomes?
All right.
And
go ahead, Butters. Finish your thought, and then I'll let Cotto get in because I know he's itching to get some time here. Go ahead.
I would say, like, this is it should be investigated. I mean, what Cotto's methods of finding voter fraud, Stanley Payne and other historians, they did this for, like, the Spanish election in 1936, and they proved a pretty good case that those elections were fraudulent, and you had a violent revolutionary government that was letting violence go unheeded. And that was one of the reasons that half the military revolted, and they had a civil war over fraudulent elections. Even U.S. elections have been rigged before. Like Samuel Tilden probably did win the 1876 election, but it was stolen because of a backroom deal between both parties. I mean, it's not unprecedented to think that maybe the way they cheat is not necessarily through ballots, but just through behind-the-scenes deals and political machines.
All right, go ahead, and thank you, Butters, for calling in. Go ahead, Cotto, and you can say whatever you want and respond to that.
I will just say that the way of looking at the Time article, really viewing it as a way of the cathedral, so to speak, telling you how much power it has over your life, I think that's the best way of viewing the Time article. That's not part of my own take on voter fraud or lack thereof in 2020. What I will also say is that if one wants to know, well, actually, there's something I have to say first. K-Max brought up a question that I wanted to address about what really is voter fraud. This isn't a legal definition. It's just how I view it. It's any time somebody participates in an election or carries out an election unlawfully for the purpose of tweaking the result in a certain manner. So that's my take. It's very broad field of study, as I said, what voter fraud is, and also things relative to voter frauds, but that's my nutshell definition of it. Now, looking at how the Democrats do voter fraud, if people would just read the New York Post article, they would find out. I'll do a very brief excerpt. Phony ballots. The ballot has no specific security features like a stamp or a watermark, so the insider said he would just make his own ballots. I just put the ballot through the copy machine and it comes out the same way, the insider said. But the return envelopes are, quote, more secure than the ballot. You could never recreate the envelope, he said, so they had to be collected from real voters. He would have his operatives fan out, going house to house, convincing voters to let them mail completed ballots on their behalf as a public service. That's called ballot harvesting, which the Democrats also want legalized nationwide in H.R. 1, by the way. Getting back to the article, the fraudster and his minions would then take the sealed envelopes home and hold them over boiling water. You have to steam it to loosen the glue, said the insider. He then would remove the real ballot, place the counterfeit ballot inside the signed certificate, and reseal the envelope. 5 minutes per ballot's tops, said the insider. The insider said he took care not to stuff the fake ballots into just a few public mailboxes, but sprinkle them around town. That way, he avoided the attention that foiled a sloppy voter fraud operation in a Patterson, New Jersey city council race this year, where 900 ballots were found in just 3 mailboxes. If they had spread them in different mailboxes, nothing would have happened, the insider said. There's a lot more, but that's just what I'm reading there about. That's just one way that phony ballots are cast.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Ford.
Well, again, there's just no evidence. This is a serious matter. Someone on the conservative case should look. Cotto will believe anything if it accords with the way he wants to see the world. You've got a New York Post article that presents zero evidence, but he believes it because it accords with what he wants to believe. Where's the evidence? They could just show like some photos. They could show some documentary evidence. The case for voter fraud should be made by somebody serious. Like the right wing should get their act together. Cotto thinks an anonymous New York Post article with zero supporting evidence that is followed on by nobody, including the New York Post. For him, that's incredibly convincing because he will believe what his emotions dictate to him. I want to believe that Cotto's right, but I just see no evidence aside from the say-so allegations of some anonymous dude in the New York Post who's simply repeating Donald Trump's complaints about mail-in ballots.
Now, what do you say to the allegations about Trump, raising a lot of money off this, Cotto, and keeping a lot of it, and kind of putting up the goon squad to defend him? Rudy Giuliani kind of looking like a clown. I mean, we covered it here on the show, but a lot of it we were laughing at him while we covered it. You know what I mean? Because it was funny, right? Rudy kind of looked like a buffoon at a certain point with the dye running down his face and stuff. Getting drunk as fuck with the reporters and stuff on the record where they're writing down about he had 18 martinis while he was talking.
All old and shitty.
Yeah, I don't know. It was not his finest hour always during that. But anyway, go ahead. What do you say to that? Did they put up enough of a defense, I guess?
The defense they put up was subpar, as I think anyone could say. What happened with that, I did a lot of research on it. A lot of lawyers who would have charged a hell of a lot of money that left to take the case, they did not take the case because they would have been stigmatized by the firm at which they worked. And these lawyers typically are from the D.C. to Boston metroplex. And so they would have been socially ostracized as well. So the Trump team was left in a very precarious spot. There was a huge social desirability bias against representing him in any of these voter fraud cases. So that limited the pool of talent which Trump's team was able to get. Giuliani did not do a great job, to say the least.
And thank you to Josh Randall, who's essentially funding this show and paying my rent and paying essentially for my subscriptions to the New York Times, the LA Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, ESPN Plus, Amazon Prime. Thank you, Josh Randall, for funding my opulent lifestyle. $10 super chat here from Josh Randall. He says, Trump won, all 81 million Biden voters were Chi-Com hacks, so go to the InfoWars store now and get triple Patriot points.
But, he's seen better days. The guy is, I believe, now in his 80s, so you can only really expect so much from a fellow like that. I don't want to be mean. But looking at one thing Luke said about my analysis of the Post article, I'm not just believing it because this is what I want to believe. I've studied cases where there are elections where there's been alleged to be voter fraud, and what the Post article said lined up with what I've seen historically about what has been done to throw elections. I just don't believe something because it pleases my emotions. And as far as the Post article goes, Luke, I mean, if they verify this stuff for themselves, the Post, before running the article, that's that. I mean, they're not going to take pictures of the guy who they're talking to, the anonymous source. They're not going to videotape him doing fraudulent ballots. He's not going to allow that to happen. That's just not how voter fraud works. That's like asking a jewel thief to videotape him breaking into a vault in Monte Carlo. It's just, I mean, this is so totally absurd that I'm really I'm surprised to see this argument brought to me because it's so faulty on its face. It's just
you said that any good journalist does not produce evidence. I mean that's a clown show analysis. You said any good journalist does not produce the evidence. The whole point of that article is there's no evidence. Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence for any of your voter fraud claims? You said you've studied this extensively. Okay, where's the evidence? Who are the experts on your side aside from clown show Kris Kobach and Hans von Spakovsky? Where's the beef, mate?
Luke, no offense, but you're starting to sound rather autistic here. This is I don't know how many more circles we could go in with this. The thing of it is that when it comes to voter fraud, a voter fraudster, like any other thief, because they're stealing an election, they are thieves, is not going to leave his fingerprints behind. He's not going to leave his DNA behind. He's not going to videotape how he does it. What will happen is that you see that the offense has been committed by circumstantial evidence. And if you can get someone to explain how it happens, they will do it anonymously, as is what happened with the Post article, and that's what you have to go by. At the end of the day, if you want to go by your argument that there was no fraud, that everything was generally hunky-dory, or that there wasn't a lot of fraud, then one would have to believe that it just so happened to be that about 4 and 5 ballots in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia counted after Election Day went for Biden over Trump, which is a statistical anomaly, as Patrick Basham said, looking at other election cycles. You would also have to believe that Georgia and Ohio, which had their mail-in ballots counted generally before Election Day, you'd have to believe that there was a totally different trend going on in those two states relative to states right next to them. You'd have to believe all this stuff. And then you'd also have to believe the Democrats are just really nice, ethical people. Meanwhile, they want to do away with voter ID and they want to have ballot harvesting, which, as was said in the article, is used to throw elections. I mean, it does not really take someone who's going to be a brain surgeon to look at all this stuff and put 2 and 2 together. And also, one has to consider.
And I agree with Joseph Cotto that we need voter ID, but I want to see some evidence that without voter ID, there's been a large amount of fraud. Conservatives simply have not produced the evidence, right? It's effortless to make allegations. It takes a little bit of work to produce evidence, if it's even there, and conservatives have failed to produce the evidence. Also, I think ballot harvesting is a problem. So I'm troubled by ballot harvesting. There are insecurities, inefficiencies, and incompetence in our electoral process. So I'd love to see it get cleaned up.
In Arizona, why there are so many people freaking out about the audit there, why there are so many Democrats who are losing their minds over it. If it's just BS, if it's just Republicans being clowns, let them do it and make fools of themselves. And one final thing, the report that Navarro did, the Immaculate Deception, was very much talked about in December. I went looking it up just to see any stuff that might be of interest, and it's almost gone. It's almost totally scrubbed from the internet. You can only find a few obscure links to it, and even then you have to look very hard. It just doesn't come up at you. Social media posts referring to it were deleted. Videos talking about it were deleted. Entire articles referring to it were deleted, even if they weren't nice articles about it. People scrub this stuff because they're afraid of it. They don't like it. And if they would not be afraid of that, they would not be afraid of the Arizona audit if they...
So I just put into Google Peter Navarro, and the the Immaculate Deception PDF. It's really easy to find. It comes right up in the first result. So yeah, I'm sure it's been scrubbed some places. It's very easy to find. It comes up first result in Google. Put in Peter Navarro, the Immaculate Deception PDF. Not so difficult to find.
They did not believe that if they believed that the election was 100% legit. I mean, you really do have to put two and two together here. There's not going to be some veteran fraudster who reports himself committing numerous felonies
and Half Galatian says, Luke, the absence of the requirement to produce voter ID is itself evidence of desire for fraud to occur. No, not at all. Is, any instance where you're not required to produce ID, does that indicate that there's a desire for fraud to occur? And let's say there's all the desire in the world. You need evidence that fraud's occurring. Where's the evidence? Where's the beef? Where's the substance? It's effortless to make all these allegations. It takes a little bit of effort to substantiate them. Why can't the Republicans substantiate their claims? Why are they too lazy, too incompetent, or simply there's no basis there, right? So your point logically sounds correct, but where's the substance? Where's the evidence? Where's the substantiation for this argument that without voter ID, we've got all this, massive voter fraud? Where's the evidence? Why can't people, bother putting it together? Peter Navarro's The Immaculate Deception PDF is absurd. Patrick Basham's piece is absurd. Hans von Spakovsky and Kris Kobach, what they put out is absurd. And Coulter's column on electoral fraud is absolutely clown show level analysis. If this is such a huge problem, why can't the Republicans put together someone who makes a coherent case instead of clown world analysis?
Then tells people, yes, this is what happened, and he essentially signs off on a warrant for his own arrest. That's just not how it works. This is not expecting that is not something serious. It simply isn't. You have to really look at the situation on the whole and use your powers of deduction to figure out what's going on. And saying, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? Once again, it's like looking at a safe deposit box that has had its metal cover thrown across.
And Half Galatian says, without voter ID, you have fraud, period. Okay, I can say without voter ID, you have space aliens from Mars running our government. All right, you can make all the assertions you want, but if you're a serious person, you need to provide some evidence for them. I mean, on your side, where's the evidence? Why can't anybody who's trying to make the case that there's massive amount of voter fraud, why can't one single person produce a coherent case that stands up that even a mid-wit like myself can't punch holes in? Like, why can't one person on the Republican side make a coherent case? Why is every single Republican who tries to make the case that there's massive voter fraud, why are they all pathetic dweebs, losers, fools, just incompetent, just ridiculous clown level of analysis? Why can't one person on the Republican side make a coherent case with substantiation, with footnotes, with evidence? Why can't one single person put it together, right? Instead, all these buffoons who are trying to make the case that there's massive amount of voter fraud, not one single person can put together a coherent case. Now, you can make all the allegations you want that without XYZ, period, there's fraud. That's meaningless, right? One person needs to make a case to substantiate your allegations. Why is not one Republican able to make that case? All right, Republicans have put tremendous effort into proving voter fraud. All right, they have made it number one priority for federal attorneys. All right, this was true under George W. Bush. Number one priority for federal attorneys was to establish voter fraud. And what did they find? Bogus. The best they've been able to find is 0.0001% of votes cast may have been fraudulent. Okay, they make it the number one priority. They put their best, their smartest, their most capable, their most diligent, their most ideologically committed federal attorneys on the case to make the case for voter fraud, and they come up with bupkis. Why can't Republicans make one single coherent case that stands up to a mid-level IQ analysis like mine? All right, if a 120 IQ dude like me, all right, can punch holes in it, then, and you're putting your best, then there's no case until you show evidence and provide a coherent case. So you can make all sorts of assertions. You can say XYZ, period, there's fraud. That's meaningless unless you can find one person who provides some evidence for your side. Republicans have repeatedly made voter fraud top priority, right? President Donald Trump started a voter fraud commission. And what did it come up with? Nothing. George H.W. Bush fired all sorts of federal attorneys so he can put into the federal attorney positions smart, capable, educated, ideologically devoted federal attorneys who made stopping voter fraud, uncovering voter fraud, and prosecuting voter fraud their number one priority. And what did they come up with for that effort? They came up with bupkis. They came up with 0.00001% of cases may have been fraudulent. That's weak, right? You can make all the assertions in the world that the sun revolves around the earth, right? But where's the evidence? Now, I understand that for most people, all they need is a Twitter account saying what they believe. I understand that if you have a certain strong ideological commitment, you just need to see a video and be told that the video says something, and that's all the support you need. All right. I understand that you want to live, not choosing half Galician here. I'm saying the person who lives in the world I just described, you want to live in a comic book world, right? You love, the comic book quality of the Tucker Carlson show. Like Fox News is a tabloid show. It's aimed at like a 100 IQ crowd. Right, so you just want to follow people who tell you what you want to hear. You want to believe in a comic book world where there are these superheroes here and there are these baddie Democrats here, and you just want to have regurgitated your own views, and you want to be made stronger in your belief that your group is being victimized and the bad elites are out to screw you over, and you don't want to do any work, and you don't require any substance. All you want are certain feels, all right? So that's not how I operate. Like, there are tons of talk show hosts and pundits who will give you the feelings that you so desire. I'm interested in evidence. I'm not interested in comic books. There are all sorts of shows out there who will reinforce your comic book view of the world, where there are superhero Republicans doing the diligent fight against those evil, bad Democrats, right? And how you're being screwed over, but I'm on your side. I'm fighting for you, the little guy, against all these big, bad elites, all right? So go watch all the comic book shows that you want. Go watch Fox News. Go get that comic book perspective from Tucker Carlson. Tucker does do some good work. He does a ton of completely irresponsible, trashy, ridiculous, stupid, idiotic, moronic work as well. So there's the comic book world, and it's a funner, easier, less demanding world. So I don't judge you that you want to live in a comic book world. Like, you probably have a tiring life. You've got a wife, you've got kids, you've got a demanding job. After all those obligations, you just want to be fed back to you certain feelings. And so I understand that's where you're coming from. That's not where I'm coming from, all right? I work hard to try to ascertain what's the latest and greatest academic research into areas of knowledge that are of importance to me. This is a very different approach than the world of comic books. So you want superhero movies, you want superhero punditry, you want superhero talk radio, you want superhero live streams, you want everything in a cartoonish version of reality, right? That's not this show. This is not the comic book version of the world. This is not the comic book show on voter fraud. I actually want to see evidence, right? Look, you just want cartoons, and I get it, right? You've got a tough life. Why should you not chill? Why should you not get all the, the great feelings that you deserve? You deserve to feel good, bro. And I'm not going to judge your feelings, but that's not the world that I'm interested in, right? The comic books are over here, right? I'm interested in evidence. So far, Republicans have only come up with buffoonish cartoon versions of reality when they try to make the case for massive voter fraud.
Across the room, obviously it was sliced off. You have a bag there that used to hold very expensive jewels that has the name of the jeweler on it, and it's empty. And then somebody says, well, there's no evidence that there was a theft here, so why are you talking about it? Stop talking about the theft. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Now let me get Ford's response. He said you were acting sort of autistic, Mr. Ford.
Yeah, I'll just stick to the evidence. So he's using an analogy that you see a jewelry box that's been ripped open. Okay, where's the jewelry box? You say that voter fraud thieves are like other thieves. They try to get away with it. Yes, all thieves try to get away with it. Some thieves get caught. All right. You cannot enter a room without leaving some DNA evidence behind. Voter fraud can be prosecuted. There are people who've been prosecuted for it. It's a crime. It's like any other crime. It needs evidence, and you prosecute people for it. You can't come up with any evidence. And there are no major anomalies in this election. Trump barely won Pennsylvania. He barely won Michigan. He barely won Wisconsin in 2016. This time around, he barely lost Pennsylvania. He barely lost Michigan. He barely lost Wisconsin. There's no dramatic anomaly. You say the major case for anomalies is Pennsylvania. Well, he barely won in 2016. He barely loses in 2020. Only 2 counties change in Pennsylvania. There's no dramatic anomaly. You don't see like, oh, there's suddenly a huge Democratic turnout here, but no matching increase in Republican turnout. So again, you can't make an evidence. And then you're saying, oh, people are intimidated to make the case for voter fraud. Most Republicans believe in voter fraud. Joseph Cotto believes that the reason that Peter Navarro's killer essay on voter fraud in the 2020 election is because everybody's just so damn scared and intimidated. Most Republicans believe that there was voter fraud. So the reason that the Peter Navarro's essay is not on the internet, we're supposed to believe that everyone's afraid to post it on their website because there'll be these mysterious forces that will just force it down and ruin your life. Come on, man.
No, I need to address. Luke, it was literally scrubbed. Articles that were talking about it have 404 links now. Social media posts that brought it up were removed. I saw it for myself. This isn't, me talking about shadowy forces. This is me talking about the very real impact of censorship. And to say that this is not a concerted effort, I don't know what else to say. I mean, I think you're almost pulling my leg at this point. I mean, this is ridiculous. It's beyond what I could even put into words. It's just crazy, actually.
The reason you can't put it into words is that you can't mount a case. You can't provide any evidence. That's why you have trouble putting it into words. You can't provide any evidence.
I saw the...
Oh, you saw something on the internet. Now, you can't provide any evidence that you saw this, but you saw something on the internet. That's supposed to be evidence? Come on.
Luke, stop it. You're acting like a child. What I saw in December was these articles, these social media posts, these statements about the report, and now they are gone. And Google does not let you find the report.
Now, what are the statements? What are we referring to here? Sorry, what statements are we referring to?
Do you want me to go, Val?
I remember all of them.
Yeah, thank you. Goodbye, Butters. Thank you. Sorry.
It's specific ones that they were posting on social media, talking about it, videos about it. One was on Vimeo, a lot of tweets about it. There was also an article at the anti-abortion website Lifestyle News. That's gone. There was another article I forget the exact website right now, but that's gone as well. And I was just shocked to see all this. There was more stuff too. It's just something's escaping my mind at the moment. But no, if you really want to see what I'm talking about, I encourage people to just go on Google right now and type up the Immaculate Deception Navarro, and you will see how hard it is to find that article. There is only the Steve Bannon website that still has it, and Google doesn't exactly make that easy to find.
Now let him get in. Also, Butters killed me. He was there the whole time. He said, "Can I go? Do you need me, Rob?" In the middle of that, that absolutely killed me. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Ford. What would you say to his response there?
Well, I mean, if these articles are important, then post them on a website. Put together a coherent case, not just I saw something on the internet and now it's been scrubbed from social media. Yes, there is internet censorship. And I think the level of internet censorship by big tech is absolutely absurd. That Google and Facebook and Twitter, they're definitely slanted towards the Democrats. You can't have a free conversation on big tech. Absolutely, totally agree with Cotto. But that's not the full extent of the internet. You can put something up on a website, like put this stuff together. You'll be the hero of the republic. I don't know why all these Republicans who are saying that voter fraud may well have determined the 2020 election can't be bothered to write down, put together, and publish a coherent case. Like if the things you're saying are true, then put them on a website. Document them, write them down, make a coherent case.
Well, Luke, in the Navarro report, specifically the Immaculate Deception, there was another one, the Art of the Steal. There were specific cases of illegal voting conduct that were outlined. I'm actually looking at them right now. We don't have time to get into all of them here, but they are there. People can read them. There are footnotes, and no surprise, this article now is very difficult to find. You seem to, even though you're talking about tech censorship, you seem to have a great deal of faith in the internet, in the corporations that run the internet, being of the mindset that they're going to make this information easy to find. If somebody wanted to be the hero of the Republic and post this stuff, well, if they did that, Google would then just erase it from their search results. Twitter would probably ban their account. YouTube would give them a strike. It doesn't, if anybody thinks that what I'm talking about here is absurd, I don't think they've really researched social media censorship and how it works. You make this out to be much easier than the endeavor actually would be. Also, you said that people should have joined up Trump representing him, I believe, in his lawsuits because it would have been good for them. No, it would have been terrible for them. It doesn't matter whether or not the facts are there or not. If you work at a large law firm, which is generally Democratic, as most trial lawyers vote, and you're in a large urban area between D.C. and Boston, there you have almost total Democratic homogeneity among trial lawyers. If you represent Trump, you need to take it to the Supreme Court and you win, you can still get fired from your firm because they hate you. It's not about whether or not you're actually right. It's about people exhibiting malice on the basis of their political views. And that happens all the time with the specific intent of destroying people's careers. And that fear of having one's career destroyed is what did not lead a lot of lawyers to take Trump's cases after the election.
Okay, so Laponius is caricaturing my perspective here with, I have no problem with someone stealing the election as long as they do it legally. I haven't said anything about my feelings, right? So for you, this is all about the feels. My feelings I don't see as particularly important to an objective analysis of voter fraud. So I'm not all about whether this is cool or uncool, whether this is hip or unhip, whether this makes me feel this or that makes me feel that, right? So you will find people who will cater to your feels, and they'll help provide you with the feels. Like when you have sex with a porn star, she'll often tell you that your cock is perfect, right? You have sex with a normal woman, she doesn't say that. Like porn stars will scream out in cock-drunk ecstasy, and prostitutes will say all sorts of things to you about how amazing you are in bed. And real women, they won't provide you necessarily with that fulsome verbal experience. I've never had a regular woman, praise my penis. Like, only porn stars have praised my penis. So to me, it's just irrelevant to talk about voter fraud and keep the focus on how does it make me feel. Like, I'm sure there are all sorts of live streams and pundits who will cater to an analysis that's based entirely on how they feel about something. That is not this show.
So he was stuck with other people.
All right. Rowhouse over on killstream.live/entropy says, do both agree we need a voter ID requirement, the one being proposed in Georgia? How is this racist? All would be required to have one that should be free and available. What would you say to that, Luke?
Yeah, voter ID sounds perfectly great to me.
Okay, what about you, Joseph?
Oh, I'm totally in favor of voter ID. I'll go even further. I believe that the only people who should be able to vote are those who pass a civics test and literacy test, and they obviously get the voter ID with some.
Why not property? Why not?
That's my ideal system. But.
Why stop there? All right, now let's see. I'm kidding slightly. Rowhouse says, did Luke see Ralph's interview with Jamie Vine? She was a porn star who hated her life. How common was that? He asked, could Ralph find a happy porn star to interview? Then he asked, could Luke set it up? I think she actually went back and did some porn after that. I'm not sure. I haven't checked in.
I thought it was quite a compelling interview. I remember
you saw it.
The Kendra Jade. And afterwards, she said, Lukey, you know how porn stars always tell the media that they weren't molested as kids? Well, it's not true. We were all molested as kids. I was molested when I was a little kid. So when I have sex, I disassociate. I float up to the ceiling and kind of look down on myself when I'm having sex. So generally speaking, happiness is not a large quality in the pornography industry. But there are some happy porn stars. So it's not like, they're just all absolutely miserable.
She really did. You said you saw it. It was some things she said. It was I only just did it the one time. I haven't went back and watched it, but there were just some declarations in that. Definitely go back. I think that's the first thing posted on Odyssey, maybe on our channel. Odyssey.com/@the-Ralph-Retort. Of course, Killstream.tv. Many of you have subscribed to that during this show, actually. Thank you for the support. The replay will be up on there right after. I'm going to try uploading the audio. It has a thing where you can upload audio. I just haven't done it yet. So we'll try that right after and put that up a little early as well on Killstream.tv. I think you'll have to listen to it on the app, though. I don't know if it'll let you download, but still, I'll put it up there. Okay, now let's see. Did I get both row house questions? Yeah, I did. Okay, let's see. Slipstream, you're on the kill stream, and you called in, sir. Go ahead. But you're muted, so it won't work if you talk in the microphone while the sound is turned off like that. It just won't.
Maybe if he tries really hard.
Maybe if he just focuses on it really, really fucking hard.
Yeah,
I mean,
just look at your microphone really hard.
It's possible. My dog used to do that whenever I was, if I was eating something really good, it'll just sit there and try to use its dog powers to make you give it a bite. You know what I mean?
That's how my microphone's set up. Most people do like push to talk. I have to like focus on it for a minute or two.
It's just like think about it really hard. Yeah. Elon Musk.
Best.
All right, now go. Go ahead, Slipstream. Are you there? I saw you unmuted yourself, but I'm still not hearing any sound, though. That's the problem. Slipstream, hello. Okay, well, we gave it the old college try there, didn't we? Now let's see. I think there was a couple on Trovo, Patrick's and Mercury, Radical Rooster, and a Fireball. Thank you both. Hank Scorpio says Luke's people are the real buck breakers. He managed to work in both this week. Buck breaker meme. Okay. Golden Donut says, let's see. These two debaters are the proof that democracy is a bad system and the vote is that's kind of rude, by the way, but he says, and the vote is a control mechanism to keep the general population content. The system shouldn't be saved. What do you say to that, gentlemen? This system is decrepit and should just go the way of, the telegraph. Motherfuckers don't send telegrams now either, but
Well, yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. I don't know how good Luke and I are as examples of democracy now working out, but if I had my way, there would be a constitutional monarchy, as I said, with a very restricted franchise. So I certainly am open to alternatives to the present state of affairs.
What about you, Luke?
I think the system compared to other systems works fairly well. What system's better? China, Japan, North Korea, Nigeria, France? I mean, compared to the alternatives, the United States seems to be doing fairly well in some ways, not so well in other ways. So, I mean, we have to deal with the real world. I overwhelmingly find that people don't see the world as it is. People see the world as they are. And those who think that they're living in hell, that this system's so horrible, these are usually, very deeply troubled, screwed up losers. And people don't want to take responsibility for their own losing in life. So they go, oh, it's the system's screwing me. Look, if you can't build a good life in this system and you've got an above average IQ, then there's something wrong with you. It's not the system, but people always want to blame the system. It's the man. He's got his foot on my neck, bro. It's like, oh, give me that, give me this, give me that. The system's really holding me down, man. I mean, if you've got an above average IQ in this country, you should be able to do fine.
What do you say to that, Cotto? And then we'll take it around home. I think I'll let you guys make your final points, final arguments here.
Sure. I think that looking at, whether or not America works for certain people, obviously that's an individualized matter. I can't say anything in general. What I will say is that this country has more and more people who have debt, who have not really great career prospects. They're probably going to be working, not even paying off their debt from college well into their 40s or maybe even their 50s, and obviously not got much to save up for retirement then. I am a big fan of, obviously, of capitalism. I'm a big fan of having a system that represents the people in a responsible way, such as within the parameters that I mentioned before. But I do see why a lot of people have issues with the present day U.S. Some people go very far to the left, some people go very far to the right, and then you have this bizarre Huey Long faction that wants, far right social views and far left economics views. But what all this shows is that America has produced a lot of very lost, very angry, very desperate people. And that certainly is something negative to say about the country on the whole itself. Not left, not right, not center. It's just a very, very unfortunate attribute of modern America. And looking at that I think really should give people, regardless of what their political views are, some food for thought. And hopefully it gives them pause in trying to figure out exactly what's going on. Because for whatever reason now, America has produced a lot of people who just don't feel that they have much going for them. And that's created a lot of radicalism. And, to talk about IQ and such, that certainly people who are more intelligent are more likely than not to figure out a way to make a go of things for themselves productively. But in some cases, people just don't have the cards play out in their favor. So I don't want to make a general statement like that either, even though, as I said, there is a general principle that people more intelligent are going to create better situations for themselves. But no, America has real problems. And I wouldn't necessarily hold up the country as it now exists as an example to anyone of what their homeland should be like.
All right. Mr. Ford, go ahead. Give your final takes here. Tell people where they can find you as well. We'll probably have you back.
Thank you.
Like
I've got a website, lukeford.net. I've got 2 channels on YouTube. Luke is back, and Luke Ford live streams also on Odyssey and Rumble /Luke Ford. So I'm just waiting to see a good, strong case for voter fraud because I want to see it. I think this is a very important issue, and I'm just disappointed with the clown level analysis that's being presented so far by Patrick Basham, by Hans von Spakovsky, by Kris Kobach, and the Federalist, and these right-wing publications and these right-wing apparatchiks who they've got emotional feelings, but they've done a really shoddy job making their case. And I'm hoping that someone on the right will come along and make a strong case. Pass.
Because facts don't care about your feelings, right, Luke?
All right.
Exactly.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Cotto.
Well, and this has been a very good conversation. I've enjoyed it. Even though Luke and I have had a spirited disagreement, I still enjoy speaking with him very much, and I look forward to doing so again down the road on my show, his show, or perhaps here if Ethan would be so kind as to have us on again. It really, I think the divide really between Luke and I, it's more than voter fraud. It's whether or not one looks at the whole situation and deducts what's going on, or whether one just looks for bits and pieces to tie together that are absolutely 100% true, or so one thinks, and then one ignores everything else, which is to say the broader picture. I obviously take the more holistic approach, but some people are going to like just looking for, A, B, and C, and if there's no D, then it's inferred that there's no Z either. So, whatever. But at the same time, I have enjoyed it, and I do thank Ethan for allowing us on to have this discussion. And if people want to watch Cotto Gottfried, just go on Google, type in Cotto Gottfried Rumble, subscribe there, or go subscribe to Cotto Gottfried on YouTube. You know, we'll do live streams there. I'm also on Twitter, Joseph Ford Cotto. I'm not hard to find. So that is that. It's been a very great discussion. I've enjoyed it.
Also, I see on killstream.live/tip, I got to ask this because they'll say I dodged it. I see Winston Fujimori. I've never heard this before. I don't think this is true, but I'll ask it for Mr. Ford anyway. Question for Ford: is it true that you created and fund the GDL, which is the Goyim Defense League?
Yes, that's entirely my funding and my direction. But,
I read on something on the internet earlier that said that.
What can I say? Hey, but look, just don't tell my friends at synagogue, please. Let's just keep this within the Goyish tribe, okay? Don't let the
just
Yidden
between us.
Out, yeah,
it's just
I do. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I'm glad we got that. But we got that out of the way. Mr. Luke Ford, Mr. Joseph Cotto, have a good one. Hope to have you both back sometime
Take
soon.
care.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Take it easy.
Okay, so I had a discussion on voter fraud with Joseph Cotto May 13, so almost a month before this particular.
It's interesting. Obviously, with the election, my take is that there were a lot of problems in key swing states, not like the crazy conspiracy theorism that really enamored far too much of Trump's base, the garbage pushed by Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell and all that, that stuff. I was going to use a different word to describe it, but I'll leave it at that. I think that when it comes to that election, it obviously was aggravating to a lot of people because Trump was leading until on election night, until he wasn't in the days after, and there were a lot of laws broken in terms of how ballots could be counted, accepted, tabulated, this whole thing. And it was so obviously done in a way which benefited a certain party by advocates of a certain party that, there were no two ways about it, that it was highly you wouldn't say the whole system is rigged, but it was a highly biased procedure which would not have stood in other circumstances. So there's that. But then people take it to a level like these conspiracy theories with regard to voting machines, that's clearly a form of coping that is a total dead end. So yeah, there's a lot of nuance with regard to the election, but it is it's a very difficult situation, and it's something that people are not going to get over, even if they're totally fine people for a while, if they ever do, because they see it as an injustice just because of some very obvious things that went wrong. And what are you going to do? It's and to be honest, the people who say,
well, what are you going to do? You're going to watch Tucker Carlson, mate. That's what you're going to do.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Dr. Houman Norchazim is one of the country's leading immunologists. He's also a surgeon. Norchazim has held appointments at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, Harvard Medical School, and then at the VA in Philadelphia. He's written dozens of peer-reviewed articles in publications like the New England Journal of Medicine and the Journal of Immunology. He has every possible credential in his field. So in other words, by any measure, including the measures now being used to justify censorship in Silicon Valley, Dr. Houman Norchazim is unquestionably an expert. Last night, we invited him on this show to discuss reports, specifically from Israel, but also from other countries, that may have profound implications for young people in the United States. Researchers around the world have noted that coronavirus vaccines appear to cause a stunningly large number of young people to develop a potentially...
Okay, this is unreasonable and irresponsible. Not playing this nonsense.
In the media, the Democratic Party, whatever, that the election was totally fine. Their position is not helped. One is you see the audit going on in Arizona. The county that is suspected of having some big problems doesn't provide full information to the auditors, who are the Arizona State Senate, and they keep trying to essentially kick the can down the road with stuff they provide them, whether they lie to the Senate about what they're going to do. So clearly there's bad stuff going on there, but also clearly people take it to a level which is just copium, so to speak, and they wind up destroying themselves. They wind up destroying their sanity, essentially, in the process. I will just say that if you have a reasonable, responsible question or comment for Luke or myself, please leave it via Streamlabs. We'll get to it before we go. Thank you very much in advance, but please do not save it all for the end. Luke, anything to say about what I just brought up?
Yeah, Donald Trump was never very popular, so he never... Sure. He almost never had an approval rating over 50%. So given his approval rating, one would not have expected him to win re-election, because it was usually in the high 30s or low 40s. This is not an approval rating that generally gets re-elected. Also, Trump energized his opponents even more than he energized his supporters. So you saw a very substantial increase in turnout in 2018, and you saw it primarily in the suburbs. So what happened was, in the key states and in all the other states, there was approximately a 2% suburban turnout away from Trump and towards the Democratic candidate. And that essentially decided the election. Donald Trump, for all his virtues, and I was incredibly thrilled by a lot of the things that he did, he's never shown that he's particularly good at running things. He was not good at running things in business. He would have been far richer if he'd simply invested the funds in the most ordinary treasuries, rather than do all the things that he did in business. He's never shown he's very good at running things. He was not particularly adept at running things as president of the United States, and he never expanded his support, and he never showed much interest in expanding his support. And despite all that, he still would have been reelected without COVID, but he just said too many bizarre things that people in the suburbs in particular turned against him. Now, higher turnout elections like the 2020 election are generally conceived are going to be bad for Republicans. So Republicans usually do better with lower turnouts in elections, because Republican voters usually are more disciplined. They're more willing to go through sun and rain. Democrats rely on a lot of low information voters. So I understand high turnout elections usually go for Democrats, low turnout elections more likely to go for Republicans. And so it's very much in the Democrats' interest to make voting as easy as possible, just as it's very much in Republicans. Okay, so what I'm stating here is the conventional wisdom, and it's not necessarily supported by academic research. So there's academic research out of Stanford that voting by mail doesn't create a partisan advantage. So what I was just saying then back on May 13th, I was echoing the conventional wisdom. It's not necessarily accurate, though. Republican interest to make voting as difficult as possible. Now, Republicans can't come out and say, we want to suppress the vote, but it's obviously in Republican interest to move the voter turnout down a little bit, just as it's in the Democrats' interest to move the voter turnout up a little bit. If voter turnout keeps going up, a lot more black people and Latinos and low information voters are going to vote, and they're overwhelmingly going to vote for the Democrats. Because it's not socially acceptable to say that you're for suppressing the vote, Republicans use this rhetoric of voter fraud. And it's been a big deal since the Motor Voter Registration Act passed by Bill Clinton circa 1993, and Republicans have placed enormous rhetorical effort into making the case for massive amounts of voter fraud. They have all these talking heads, and they're just so pathetic. I mean, look, I understand rhetoric, and I understand if you can just like diminish the minority vote, 2%, that you increase the odds of Republicans winning certain seats. But I'm not going to buy your rhetoric. Republican presidents from Trump to George W. Bush to Ronald Reagan put all sorts of federal attorneys into place to pursue voter fraud, and they can never come up with more than a handful of cases. Hans von Spakovsky, the Heritage Center's voter fraud expert, is able to come up with about 1,300 cases of voter fraud over the past 40 years. So over the past 40 years, we've had over 1 billion votes. So this is not an example of me praising Hans von Spakovsky. This is an example of me saying that even the Republicans' go-to guy for voter fraud can only come up with this tiny number, over 1 billion ballots cast, and you can only come up with 1,325 cases of voter fraud. It's counted. And he can come up with documented cases of about 1,300. So Republicans were always screaming about voter fraud. President Trump was always screaming about voter fraud. They've never been able to assemble the evidence. There's absolutely no price paid for crying and yelling and screaming about voter fraud, but people aren't coming up with the evidence. It's absolutely pathetic. There is absolutely no rational reason for an individual to commit voter fraud. The upside is you get to add one vote for your candidate. The downside is that you can become a convicted felon, that you can serve 5 years in prison. It makes absolutely no rational sense in the world. Why would an illegal alien who's got a stolen social security number go out there to commit voter fraud? He's very likely to get caught and then expelled from the country. So people talk about, the illegal aliens, they're voting in mass. Republicans use all this rhetoric, but they've never been able to assemble evidence that would start to substantiate their case. Now, I understand Republicans are simply doing this for rhetorical purposes. What they really want to do is suppress the vote, particularly of low information minority voters who overwhelmingly vote for the Democrats. So it's a rhetorical device, but idiots or people who don't think very deeply go, my favorite Republican talk show hosts and talking heads and politicians are always talking about voter fraud, therefore they're talking about something real. But there's absolutely no connection often between rhetoric and reality.
I have to address quite a few things you said, although I couldn't really do it without this. I don't know if you read the New York Post, but there was a very brilliant, actually, article posted there, which is the only one of its kind that I've ever seen. And it's titled Confessions of a Voter Fraud. I was a master at fixing mail-in ballots. And I'll read a bit, but I'll skip around and I'll try to get your point of view. By the way, though, before I go any further, I will say that if you have a reasonable, responsible question or comment for Luke or myself, please leave it via Streamlabs. We'll get to it before we go, but please do save it all for the end. Leave it as soon as you can. Thank you very much in advance. Anyway, getting back to the New York Post article, a top Democratic operative says voter fraud, especially with mail-in ballots, is no myth, and he knows this because he's been doing it on a grand scale.
This article does not present any evidence.
But led teams of fraudsters and mentored at least 20 operatives in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania, a critical 2020 swing state. The fraudster said, there's no race in New Jersey from city council to United States Senate that we haven't worked on. I worked on a fire commissioner's race in Burlington County. The smaller the race, the easier it is to do. A Bernie Sanders diehard with no horse in the presidential race, he said he felt compelled to come forward in the hope that states would act now to fix the glaring security problems present in mail-in ballots. This is a real thing, he said. There's going to be a fucking war coming November 3rd over this stuff. If they knew how the sausage was made, they could fix it. Now, I will skip down a bit, but Luke, anything to say thus far about what I brought up?
Yeah, it provides no evidence. I could get someone to tell you, Joseph, that Jesus Christ appeared to them in a vision and that Jesus is real and he's coming back. I could get someone to tell you that the communists have infiltrated the CIA. I could get someone to tell you, I've examined evidence he's provided that extraterrestrials are real. But you'll notice this New York Post article does not present any evidence. It does not show pictures of, does not show all these documents that they say that they've seen. It's just an anonymous source comes up with a story.
It's not go ahead.
It's not an anonymous. Where's the evidence?
I was going to say the source could not be named publicly for obvious reasons because the source would be subject to prosecution. What the source said, though, about the campaigns that he's worked on, the stuff that he's done, it was reviewed and verified by the New York Post. Obviously, they're not going to run something just from some guy who cannot ascertain that he is who he claims to be. That would be a little much even in this age of media bias. So, also to say that, there's no evidence they did what he did, you have to wonder why a veteran political operative of New Jersey Democratic campaigns, and New Jersey is a state with a Democratic machine. It's actually many different Democratic machines, but they run everything. You'd have to wonder why someone would just come forward and say that they did this stuff when they didn't actually do it. But beyond just that, what he said he worked on was verified by the New York Post. That's why they ran the article. And there were, I get to it reading further down the article, but there were cases in New Jersey very recently, Patterson being one of them, where entire elections had to be thrown out because of voter fraud using the exact same methodology that he details in the article. That was actually the court papers. So it's really, it's very serious stuff. There's no two ways about it. And this has been going on for quite a while. And the motivation is clear here. People do this, as he will describe, because they make money off of it, and because they get to see the party that they like maintain power. But money, of course, is a big, huge motivator. So I'll just throw that out there. Before I go on, Luke, anything to say?
Yeah, the New York Post says that they verified it. I mean, the New York Post is the most reckless of the mainstream publications. It has a long history of just going out there on the limb. It provides no evidence. It just tells us that the New York Post, who was telling us a couple of weeks ago that every illegal immigrant child was getting a copy of Kamala Harris's kids' book, turned out that one child got one copy of Kamala Harris's book because it had been donated, but the New York Post was blowing it up. The New York Post is an incredibly reckless organization that provides no substantial evidence. So there are people who study voter fraud, and there are people who specialize in voter fraud. And then there's the New York Post who wants us to believe their bona fides when they provide no substantial evidence. Like I could tell you, Joseph, I could verify that this person talked to Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ said to my friend, and I'll sign an affidavit. Like I see all these people on the right going, 40, there are affidavits. Oh my God, there are affidavits about voter fraud. Affidavit means nothing. It has no necessary substance. An affidavit simply says that I believe what I'm saying. I can provide you, Cotto, with an affidavit from someone who says that Jesus Christ came to him and wants you to believe in him as your personal savior. Are you going to be swayed, even though I will authenticate that this person really did experience Jesus Christ? I mean, it's pointless. You got to provide some evidence. Like only a bozo is going to believe that because the New York Post said that they verified it, but then provide no substance that this is somehow compelling evidence when we've got so many other people who study this issue. Hans von Spakovsky has built his whole career on the issue of voter fraud. How many cases of voter fraud has he been able to come up with in the last 40 years? About 1,300. Yeah, some elections have been wrecked by voter fraud, and they have to do them over. Usually this isn't voter fraud, because voter fraud has come to be understood as an infinitely elastic term. So for some people who are watching right now, they believe it's voter fraud that there are more Democrats than Republicans in the news media. Some people believe it's voter fraud if you have mail-in voting. It's just infinitely voter fraud. Like, anything can become voter fraud, but if you define voter fraud with something meaningful, such as it's a crime that gets prosecuted, we only have infinitesimal examples. Even people who devote their whole careers to building up themselves as experts on voter fraud, going on Fox News and syndicated talk radio, talking about the great ills of voter fraud. The people who make the case for massive voter fraud are so pathetic. I wish they were stronger, because they're on my side politically. Hans von Spakovsky, John Fund. John Fund published 2 books on voter fraud. And how does he start his main book on voter fraud? Saying that the 9/11 hijackers were registered to vote. And there's absolutely no evidence. He just makes stuff up. His source is Michael Chertoff told him this. And so when he was asked for his notes on this conversation, he can't come up with anything. I wish the people making the case for voter fraud, publishing the books, full-time activists, could substantiate their case instead of, coming out with this palaver.
Well, Luke, a few things need to be brought up here. Number one, you say just anybody can do an affidavit. An affidavit means nothing. I don't give legal advice, obviously, but I will say that an affidavit is something signed under penalty of perjury. So if you say something happened and you put it in an affidavit, you can go to jail. That's found to be false.
Yeah, and how often does that happen? How often do people get put in jail for filing a false affidavit? Almost never happens. So yeah, in theory, there's a downside. In theory, there's punishment. In theory, they can be sent to jail. What happens in the real world? It virtually never happens in the real world for filing a false affidavit. Filing an affidavit in and of itself about, say, voter fraud means nothing, right? It at best, it possibly points a finger towards where there might be some evidence.
It's not just something that people do for the hell of it. Number two, you say that just because somebody says voter fraud happened, it's like believe they meant Jesus Christ. Well, there is documented proof that voter fraud took place. There's no documented proof that Jesus Christ ever existed, to be blunt. So I mean, that's a huge disparity right there. Then number three, looking at what voter fraud means, as it's defined in the article that I am reading, it means something very, very specific. And I'll get to that in a minute. I will say that looking at voter fraud, moreover, it is something that is very often defined too broadly. That leads to unfortunate situations such as you mentioned, but it is a very real thing. And then you said, well, how come Hans von Spakovsky didn't find any evidence of it? Well, as will be explained, voter fraud is done very carefully so that you cannot have evidence of it, or else everyone will go to jail. Voter fraud is nothing. I'm not going to explain how it's. I'll say what's in the article, but I don't mean to explain how voter fraud is done. But it's done in a way that does not get the people who do it prosecuted, so they can do it again. That's the entire. That's how people are able to do this over and over and do it successfully. I mean, their success is obviously to the detriment of the people whose lives they impact, but that is it. So to say that it doesn't happen because von Spakovsky or others didn't find it, that's a little weird. It's like saying that it's very rare to have someone from a certain neighborhood wind up going to the hospital because they were beat by their husband. Meanwhile, the neighborhood is I'll be blunt here, a Muslim neighborhood where if a wife calls the cops on her husband, there's going to be hell to pay for it. Just because there's absence of evidence doesn't mean that there's no reason to believe that nothing bad happened if you look at the broader situation. Now, whether or not that could be fit into a criminal indictment isn't for me to answer, but it certainly is to say that the situation is not quite as cut and dry in the regard of voter fraud as you make it out to be. I will read on now. Phony ballots. The ballot has no specific security features like a stamp or a watermark. So the insider said he would just make his own ballots. I just put the ballot through the copy machine and it comes out the same way, the insider said. But the return envelopes are that foiled a sloppy Republican stronghold. He can just take those hundreds disenfranchised. They eventually, in some states like California, as I wrap it up, bribing voters spent to win his third mayoral term. He said he could have delivered the same result at a handing off the day-to-day mail-in ballots. Partisans from both parties hash out and count voter signature. So Democratic Board of Elections, and I'll just scroll down here to the very end from Hyannis, basically. That's where like the Powell Wood Dominion garbage comes in. But then you have this stuff here, which it is what it is. And people have been convicted of it. And the ones who get convicted are the ones who do this stuff very badly, as the fraudster said, like stuffing all these envelopes with fraudulent ballots into a single mailbox. So the bottom line is that, to say that this stuff exists in very small numbers or it doesn't exist at all, I think is rather bizarre. And von Spakovsky gave this his seal of approval, so to speak. So I don't think that, one could really dismiss it all that much, no matter how much they might like to. I don't pretend to know exactly how much voter fraud goes on. I don't think it goes on in every single race. And I think that people do exaggerate it for their own benefit, and this is done all the damn time. But I also believe very strongly that this is a vital tool of the Democratic Party in various races. And it goes way, way back, probably to the 1800s. And it's done because they want to expand the electorate in a way that present demographics do not yet allow them to do. And that's the point of stuff like the For the People Act, which is to create a situation where fraud, such as was described in the article, is very easy. And it's also designed to naturally expand the electorate so the Democrats can win with an expanded electorate, which has the characteristics that you described. So that's my take here. Oh, one last thing about the Post. Yes, it has had journalistic issues in the past, but so has the New York Times. Let's not forget that the New York Times published a totally bogus article which led to the Iraq War back in the day. So, I mean, the New York Post does not quite have that level of egg on its face. So, yeah, I'll pretty much just throw that out there. And I would not take seriously as gospel anything written in the New York Times or the New York Post, so because it's written in either publication, as I said before. I tend to look at everything as an opinion article nowadays, but I did want to specify that this article that I am reading here was not an opinion article as published by Post. It is intended to be a straight news article, and I think it did a fine job of presenting its case. I will just say before Luke speaks and we begin to wind things down, if anybody has a reasonable, responsible question or comment for either one of us, please do leave it in the live chat and we will address it before we go. Thank you very much in advance. Luke, anything to say about what I brought up?
Yeah, you said the New York Post does a fine job presenting its case, but its case is entirely dependent upon us trusting the New York Post that what it says is accurate. If I was able to substantiate just 10% of what is alleged in that New York Post article, I would be set for life. I would become a millionaire. I would be able to be flown all around the country, giving speeches. I would be hailed as a conservative savior. I would have a bevy of women who would let me put it anywhere. I mean, I would be set for life. Anyone who can substantiate even 10% of that article would be set for life. There'd be such a demand for them to speak. They would get huge book advances. They would be booked on Fox News. They could go on any syndicated conservative talk show that they wanted. They'd be set for life. All the incentives are to try to substantiate just 10% of what's alleged in the New York Post article. So either people on the right are so completely pathetic that even an elementary amount of investigation to substantiate just a tiny little bit of that New York Post article would then allow you to be set for life and they can't pull it off, or there's no substance to that New York Post article, which is what I would tend to suspect. If there was anything to it, people would get out there, investigate it, and reveal it because the incentives are so high. When I bring this up, that the number of voter fraud convictions are so tiny. We've got about 1,300 over the past 40 years. This is the response that you gave, and I hear all the time. Oh, well, look, it's hard to come up for evidence for voter fraud, but it's there. It's just that they're so clever covering it up. Well, everyone who commits a crime tries to cover it up. Voter fraud is not different than other crimes. It's not like, oh, they're getting away with billions of dollars of white-collar crime, and they're just so good at covering it up. I mean, all crimes, everyone who commits a crime tries to cover it up. Voter fraud is no different. You prosecute voter fraud the same way you prosecute other crimes. You do investigations, you come up with the evidence, and you prosecute. If the evidence was there, people would go prosecute it. Republican presidents have repeatedly appointed federal attorneys to put voter fraud their number one priority. What do they come up with? They come up with bogus. They put their greatest minds, their greatest weapons. They have held the presidency. They can do what they like. They can't come up with anything. But yeah, I'm sure the New York Post can come up with something that all of the greatest minds in the Republican legal team have totally failed to come up with in any depth. But yeah, maybe the New York Post can do it.
Well, Luke, I think that you have something of an emotional investment in this not being true. That's just my rather humble opinion. I will say that looking at the situation here, which even Spakovsky did not, he was obviously far more approving of it than you are. He knows more about voter fraud than you do. And at the same time, you sort of brush by his approving take on the article, which I find rather interesting, to say the absolute least. But looking at the situation, it's designed so there's not proof of it. As the fraudster said, they take very extensive measures to do this. And quite frankly, the fraudster and his allies have to be very high IQ to pull this off. The people who did get caught in Patterson doing what the fraudster does were likely low IQ people who just did it very quickly. And as such, they were exposed. It's not exactly difficult to figure out. You say, well, if only 10% of this could be verified, that someone would make a lot of money. That's true. But given the nature of the crime, it's you can't just go verify it. The only way you get information about it is when somebody screws up, as is what happened with Patterson, or if you have someone who goes on the record under condition of anonymity, but at the same time their background is verified and they're verified as working on the campaigns that they said X, Y, and Z happened in. And they also explain to the, not explain, actually show to the journalist who wrote the article that they are able to do what is described in the article. If you have a situation like that, quite clearly something is rotten in Denmark. That's all I'll say. And I don't, like I said, I'm not one who takes this voter fraud stuff to a religious level, but at the same time, it most certainly is there, and that's all I'll say about it. People can draw their own beliefs one way or the other. A bunch of stuff just came up on Streamlabs, so we'll have to get to this sort of like in a lightning round. Well, hopefully less than 1 minute per response, as long as Luke is okay with that. But so we will get to that. I'll also make the last call right now. If you have a reasonable, responsible question or comment for Luke or myself in this very spirited discussion, which I have enjoyed quite a bit thus far, please do leave it via Streamlabs, and we shall get to it before we leave. Thank you very much in advance. Okay, let's see here, if I could only find, if I could only get back to it, from Row House. For Luke and Cotto, in the Black community, do you think they ever could have a leader they would listen to who said personal responsibility must be a goal we have too? What happens to Black leaders who preach self-reliance? Well, there was one such fellow, I forgot his name, who was at to let one know who is and isn't legit. I think that is never genuine, by the way. Contention, something that's, pine
is able to see their own role in their own misery, or someone who's able to see their own group's role in its own misery. That's usually a pretty good guide to someone who's living in reality. Us.
And from Life of Brian, there's no voter fraud in Broward County. Republicans just gained 30% since Brenda Snipes was ejected as election supervisor. Also, there were no truck drivers in Minnesota confessing to harvesting illegal ballots. There was absolutely none of this Life of Brian. It's all a conspiracy theory peddled by people who don't know what they're talking about. Clearly, I am 110% serious in saying what I am saying here. Luke, very quickly, anything to say before we move on?
Yeah, it takes no effort and makes no demands on you to throw out any allegation. On the other hand, if I was to look at your allegation, look at the evidence for it, it might take me 10 hours, 20 hours, 100 hours. So you've got a lot of people pumping out allegations at no cost, and then the people who try to cut through the BS have to spend dozens of hours doing hard work.
From Event Horizon, Luke is 100% right about people in dissident movements. I hang out in these spaces as a normal evangelical because my faith is increasingly marginalized, but I still find meaning in my career as a doctor, my family, and my faith. Really interesting stuff, Event Horizon. Sort of inspirational, too. Luke, anything to say about what Event Horizon brought up?
Yeah, he seems to have a life that works.
Yes, he very much does, and that's quite a credit to him amid this age of craziness. From Event Horizon, also, I would like to ask Luke his opinion on the future of the Christian right's relationship with Israel as it wanes in the U.S. By the way, hello, Luke. I am the doc who emailed you at the start of COVID last March. You are a gentleman and hope you are well.
Yeah, I think there'll always be an unstable element to the Christian, whether it's Christian right, Christian center, or Christian left relationship with Jews and the Jewish state, just as there will always be an unstable element with Jewish relations with Christians. Like, if you are an authentic Jew, you're probably going to have a little bit of fear, concern about Christians. If you're an authentic Christian, you're always going to have rational reasons to have some concerns and fears about Jews. These are two different ways of looking at life, and so the relationships between the two groups is just inherently combustible and unstable.
From Life of Brian, Ford's talking points on voter fraud are similar to Greg Palast's trash. Technically, when the Chicago bovine constituency votes 99-1 for JFK in 1960, it's not voter fraud because the cows were not legally culpable. Very interesting perspective.
Yeah, I do the work, and this guy reads Twitter. So, I mean, I go through the main books about voter fraud. I read the academic articles about voter fraud. I spend hundreds of hours reading the most important literature on voter fraud, but other people can just go on Twitter and, throw off various accusations because there's no downside, there's no crime, and there's no cost to you to just making things up. But I put my reputation on the line, and so I do the work. You just throw out stuff.
Well, I just will throw out there that Hans von Spakovsky does a lot of work too, and he didn't have a problem with the article in the New York Post. Anyway, from Life of Brian as well. When a mailman burns every ballot from a Trump district, he leaves no direct evidence, leaving to the inane Ford/Palast talking point where bogus fraud gurus pretend forensic / circumstantial evidence, change of address flags is no evidence. Obviously, Brian, that's a good point. Voter fraud, unfortunately, is one of the, it's a crime that's not terribly difficult to get away with. It just simply because if you don't leave physical evidence on the ballot, it's rather hard for the ballot to be traced back to the fraudster. So it's really an unfortunate state of affairs with voter fraud, no question. It's something that happens far more than it should, and I think the only way to really address it is to make voting as safe as possible, like doing away with mail balloting unless it's absolutely necessary, having in-person, voter ID, signature verification at the same time, even a fingerprint scan to vote. I think all that is a great idea. Luke, anything to say about what Brian brought up?
Yes, there's very little academic research into voter fraud, either present or past. So I just want to challenge everything that I've said previously about voter fraud. Past.
Okay, I'm doing the refresh now to see if anything came up as we wind things down. Everything sort of course, was saved for the end as I imagined it would be, but what can you do? Okay, let's see here from from K-Max McDonald. I think one issue you both have as disagreement is Luke feels the American institutions are still trustworthy. Cotto and the rest of us feel they have been politicized and to the left's game. Courts, churches, the FBI were supposed to be neutral but are not now. I agree. That does seem to be the fundamental distinction here. And once something is politicized in a certain direction, I don't want to politicize all this stuff toward the right. I'll be blunt about that. I think it's good to have different institutions that serve different people well, as long as everyone's served fairly. But the problem is when you have rampant politicization, as we now have, to bring it even back toward the center where it's neutral. It's very difficult indeed. And when you consider the throngs of lefties who enter society every given year who become adults, it looks all the more unlikely. Luke, anything to say about what K-Max brought up?
Yeah, he didn't capture my view at all. I said very clearly that the Anglo-Saxon institution of the jury trial by your peers does not work in a country where there's a large tribal element. So there are all sorts of institutions that are not working very well or just totally corrupt in the United States. We've never had a time in American history or in Western history where institutions are so distrusted. And so we need to move to reestablish trust with our institutions. And COVID, for example, just exacerbated distrust of many of our elites. So much of the advice and instruction and demands that came down from elites, either medical or political, was completely bogus with regard to COVID, that it's exacerbated this lack of trust. So I think we need movement on both ends. The elites need to become more transparent, and instead of trying to, say, regulate people's daily lives so that in the early parts of the COVID epidemic, people were prevented from going to the beach, from going outside, to going to the parks, which were the very safest places they could possibly go. Politicians and medical experts acted as though they could micromanage daily life and that they knew something that they didn't know. And so they totally betrayed any public trust in them. On the other hand, this nihilistic attitude that is widespread, that, F the elites, F the institutions, F everyone, I'm just getting mine, that's not a sustainable path either. We need to find a way to reestablish trust in our institutions. That requires work and change on both the part of the elites and also on the part of the masses. Nihilism is not a viable path forward.
From Life of Brian, Luke's definition of being set for life is apparently being deplatformed from social media. Glad to have had a taste of his genius. I'll gladly donate to him Vince Bugliossi's take on the Kennedy assassination. He'll find it brilliantly conventional. Luke, anything to say? It's before you move on.
The Vincent Bugliosi book on the Kennedy assassination is absolutely superb. And so this Life of Brian guy, he wants to embrace despair, that someone who comes out and says the truth, he'll be deplatformed. He's not going to be deplatformed from Parler or Rumble or Odyssey, but oh my God, if he can't have a YouTube channel, or oh my God, if he can't have a Twitter handle, then his life is just over. It's all over, folks. There's no hope. It's all over. Anyone who tells the truth will just be ruined and destroyed. There's no possibility of honesty and truth in today's corrupt society. Oh, it's so bad. Let me have another drink.
From K-Max McDonald, could Luke Ford and Cotto do a voter fraud debate on the kill stream with Ethan Ralph? I would love it and bring my popcorn with me to watch a friendly and long-term debate. I would be very glad to do such a thing. As a matter of fact, I don't know if Ethan would be up for it or if Luke would be, but I think it would be a great idea. Luke, anything to say about what K-Max
Yeah, I'd love it, and we could even organize something ourselves if Ethan is not interested in hosting.
Yeah, we could do that. I think we had a very spirited discussion here that sort of is like a microcosm of our views. But I think that it would be really great, especially if Ralph would be up for that. Maybe I might actually send him an email, and as long as it fits Luke's time frame, and of course if Ethan is up for it, I think that it could be done. I think it would be interesting and informative for all parties concerned. I think that we have now got to everything on Streamlabs. Luke, it's been such a while since you've been on this show, and it's really glad to have you back on. This is one of our best discussions, and we've had quite a few.
Okay, so thanks to K-Max McDonald, who inspired the Killstream debate that I did last night with Joseph Cotto on the issue of voter fraud. Did it play a major role in the 2020 election? And my position is there's no evidence that it did. So who is this Hans von Spakovsky, who I keep ridiculing? So according to I'll just read from part of his Wikipedia entry. According to the New Yorker, Hans von Spakovsky has promoted the myth that democratic voter fraud is common and that it helps Democrats win elections. He supported his claims about the extent of voter fraud by citing a year 2000 investigation by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which purported to find 5,400 instances of deceased people in Georgia voting in the last 2 decades. Now, the Journal-Constitution later revised its findings, noting that it had no evidence of a single deceased person voting, and that the vast majority of the instances were definitely due to clerical errors. In an interview with the New Yorker, Hans von Spakovsky cited 2 scholars who he said could substantiate that voter fraud impersonation was a significant threat. So Robert Pastor of American University and Larry Sabato of the University of Virginia. So von Spakovsky said that Pastor had personally experienced voter impersonation. Pastor refuted von Spakovsky's claim, saying, "I think they just mistakenly checked my name when my son voted. It was just a mistake. I don't think the voter impersonation fraud is a serious problem." Both Pastor and Spakovsky said that they would only support voter ID laws if voter IDs were made free and easily available to all. Larry Spakovsky, the author of Dirty Little Secrets, also described voter impersonation as relatively rare today. In a 2011 article published by the Heritage Foundation, von Spakovsky again referred to Larry Spakovsky as an authority to establish the existence of common voter fraud, along with Stealing Elections, a book by John Fund, whose claim of voter fraud has been extensively debunked, whom he neglects to identify as the co-author of a book they jointly wrote. Von Spakovsky describes the efforts of Kansas Secretary of State Kris Kobach to expose the alleged existence of extensive voter fraud as carefully described research, even though Kris Kobach's claims have been shown to be vastly overstated. In a court decision, Fish versus Kobach, U.S. District Court Judge Julie Robinson ruled that von Spakovsky's claims of widespread voter fraud were not found to be backed up with provable research cases. The judge wrote that she gave his testimony little weight because it was premised on several misleading and unsupported examples of non-citizen voter registration, mostly outside the state of Kansas. She also noted that during the proceedings, Mr. von Spakovsky could not identify any expert on the subject of non-citizen voter registration. Okay, he testified in court. He could not identify any expert on the subject of non-citizen voter registration. When von Spakovsky tried to use a list of 30 people provided by a Kansas election official as proof of voter fraud in one county, Judge Robinson wrote in her decision that Hans von Spakovsky later admitted during cross-examination he had no personal knowledge as to whether or not any of these individuals had in fact falsely asserted U.S. citizenship when they registered to vote. He did not examine the facts of these individual cases. The guy is beyond reckless, complete buffoon. Judge Robinson found witnesses for the defense were often found to be not credible. She found defendant's expert Hans von Spakovsky as a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. He cited a U.S. GAO study for the proposition that the GAO found up to 3% of the 30,000 individuals called for jury duty from voter registration rolls were not U.S. citizens. However, on cross-examination, he admitted the GAO study contained information on a total of 8 district courts. Half reported that not one non-citizen had been called for jury duty. The 3 remaining district courts reported that less than 1% of those called for jury duty from voter rolls were non-citizens. Therefore, his report misleadingly describes the single district court with the highest percentage of people reporting they were non-citizens. He omits mention of the 7 other courts described in the GAO report, including 4 that had 0 incidents of non-citizens on voting rolls. So time after time after time, Hans von Spakovsky shows bad faith. While von Spakovsky's lack of academic background is not fatal to his credibility, the judge wrote, his clear agenda and his misleading statements render his opinions unpersuasive. According to law professor Richard Hassan, election law expert at the University of California at Irvine, there are a number of people who have been active in promoting false and exaggerated claims of voter fraud, using that as a pretext to argue for stricter voting and registration rules. Hans von Spakovsky is at the top of the list. Said that his appointment to Donald Trump's Commission on Election Integrity was a big middle finger from Trump to people serious about fixing problems with our elections. So, man who repeatedly acts in bad faith, and he's the best the Republicans come up with. This is the guy who's repeatedly brought onto talk radio and nationally syndicated radio shows at Fox News, and he's the best, along with Kris Kobach. So Kris Kobach, former Secretary of State in Kansas, 2010 press conference, he asserted there could be as many as 2,000 people who are using the identities of dead people to vote in Kansas. Okay, when the Wichita Eagle followed up on his assertion, found no evidence. Kris Kobach said there are 118,000 non-citizens registered to vote in Kansas, claim that NBC News describes as misleading and debunked. Kris Kobach supported Donald Trump's claims that millions of non-citizens voted in the 2016 presidential election. There is 0 evidence for this. 0. Kris Kobach estimated 3.2 million non-citizens voted, citing a widely debunked study. CNN asked Kris Kobach if he had any proof of his allegation that thousands of Massachusetts voters actually had voted in New Hampshire in 2016. He replied he had none. So he's just recklessly operating with bad faith. It's just a serial liar. September 2017, Kris Kobach claimed to have proof that voter fraud swung the 2016 Senate race in New Hampshire and may have swung the New Hampshire's 2016 presidential vote. Fact checkers, election expert, found that Kris Kobach's assertion was false. Kris Kobach claimed that more than 5,000 individuals voted by using out-of-state driver's licenses identification, even though New Hampshire residents are required to update their licenses to drive. Factcheck.org described Kris Kobach's claim as baseless and bogus, noted that Kris Kobach had not provided any evidence of any illegal voting. Later, Kris Kobach backtracked on his claims, but said that there had been anecdotal reports about voter fraud. Richard Hausen, Cheslow's professor of law and political science at the University of California, Irvine, and election law expert, has described Kris Kobach as a charlatan, a provocateur, a leader nationally making irresponsible claims that voter fraud is a major problem in this country. A Brennan Center for Justice report calculated that rates of actual voter fraud are between 0.0004% and 0.0009%. The Brennan Center for Justice calculated someone is more likely to be struck by lightning than to commit voter fraud.
From kindergarten all the way into graduate school at every single level, equity has changed the way kids are taught, and it's changed very much what they're taught, and it's poisoning them. Very few parents have fought back, but some are beginning to. Here's one. In Florida, a mother called Keisha King told her school board why this kind of indoctrination needs to stop immediately.
It is sad that we are even contemplating something like critical race theory, where children will be separated by their skin color and deemed permanently oppressors or oppressed in 2021. That is not teaching the truth, unless you believe that whites are better than blacks. Telling my child or any child that they are in a permanent oppressed status in America because they are black is racist. If this continues, we will look back and be responsible for the dismantling of the greatest country in the world by reverting to teaching hate and that race is a determining factor on where your destiny lies.
Good for her. She's telling the truth. Too few are. On the other hand, parents have almost no support, but now they do. The 1776 group is a new 1776 Project is a political action committee designed to help school boards, communities, elect sane people to run their schools. Ryan Grodusky is the president of it. We're happy to have him on now. Ryan, thanks so much for coming on. Tell us what you're doing.
Thank you.
It seems important.
So the 1776 Project PAC, and it's found on 1776projectpac.com, is a super PAC that anyone can donate to from around the country. And over the course of this year and hopefully next year, we will be donating and campaigning on behalf of school board candidates.
Okay, that's it. Take care, everyone. Good night. God bless. Good Shabbos.